Thank you. Good morning, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, officers. Very warm welcome on a very warm day. For those of you who haven't met, my name's Dom Morris, and I'll attempt to drive us through today's meeting, although as a new councillor, I'm under no illusions, and Sophie is definitely the sat-nav telling me where to go. So please do bear with me. We'll crack on. Just a few words, if I may, about how I'd like to run this committee. I would really like it to be a warm, positive and courteous committee, and also a very human committee. We've all had a really difficult time over the last year or so. People have got different lives and different ways, different challenges, and I think politics is difficult enough. So I really would like this to be a positive, human, critical friend of a committee. And for me, you know, environmental stuff is pretty, it's not very contentious. I'd be very surprised if we didn't all agree in the ends to which we're trying to get things to, which is, you know, a better environment in partnership with livelihoods. I think when we are going to disagree, it's going to be around ways and means, and I'd really like that to be a positive, constructive experience. So that's what I will endeavour to do, and really excited about the journey. To that end, really keen, than trying to be human, really keen to do introductions, go around the houses. We'll go councillors first, if we may. My name's Dom, and it'll be introductions plus something positive and non-worky about yourselves that we might not know. My name's Dom Morris, family farmers over in the Cotswolds near Fairford, the councillor for Fairford and Lechlade. Dad wasn't quite ready to retire, so had a previous career working for Her Majesty's government overseas in war zones and whatever else. And came back relatively recently and got elected on May the 6th, and delighted to be part of this committee and others. Around the room, we'll go to Councillor Roger Wyborn and then Councillor Susan Williams after Roger. Roger.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as you say, I'm new to this. I spent a lot of time on Cheltenham Borough, some of it as cabinet member, some of it here. Now done a clean break on county council. I do have a particular interest in the, especially on highways and transport, and be one of my big focuses. But colleagues will have on other issues. So I look forward to meeting with. Thank you for your opening words about the spirit in which you intend to conduct this. So I hope we can really get some constructive things going between us all.
Thanks, Roger. Susan next, and then afterwards it'll be Alex.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Sue Williams, and I'm a farmer over in Bisley. And I would like to reiterate what Roger said. Those were good words and very positive at the start of it, Dom. Looking forward to being part of this committee too. And what the next meeting. So that's good for the environment.
Thanks, Susan. Alex?
We haven't had Alex join the meeting yet, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to Alex as and when. Chris McFarling and then Jill Mosley after Chris. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Dom. Chris McFarling, Forest Dean District Council, also Cabinet Member for the Climate Emergency. Interesting facts. I've spent my life as a naturalist explorer, underwater as well, and a hiker with Sir David Attenborough and the Natural History Unit for a while. So keen to actually address the climate emergency, and as the report came out today, that increase our preparation for the impacts of that climate change on our citizens and our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Sounds like you're in the right place. Jill.
Jill's yet to join the meeting either, Chair.
Councillor Alan Priest, and then Phil Orford after Alan.
Thank you, Dom, and welcome to your role as the chairman of this committee. In my fourth spell as a county councillor on the Forest Dean District Council, along with Chris, share Chris's long-term vision, obviously, and short-term vision in many aspects. I share your sentiments exactly. A positive, non-political committee which needed to drive everything forward. I know I've spent quite a bit of time working over the years with Simon Excel and with Phil Williams, excellent officers, and their experience is absolutely vital. Thank you, Dom.
Thank you, Alan. Phil.
Morning, Dom. Yeah, thank you. I'm in my 6th term on the county council now, so I'm probably the old man of the party. Certainly feel like it. I'm likewise very keen on the environment. I think anybody who knows me as the Tory wet, given the division that I represent is frequently impacted by flooding, and I'm also a keen angler anyway. Looking forward to this. I like the sentiment. I do trust in the main meeting lead politics at the door. I would say that, wouldn't I? But yeah, delighted to still be on environment scrutiny. A massive scrutiny committee with plenty of work to do.
Thank you, Phil. Great to have your season experience there, and no pressure for me. Just measuring the size of the boots that I'm stepping into. Sajid, over to you.
Hi, good morning, Dom. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, first of all, welcome to the County Council and on the Environment Scrutiny Committee. I'm the City and County Councillor for the Barton and Treadworth Ward in Gloucester. This is my 2nd term on the County Council. Environment is something I am passionate about, whether it's flood alleviation, flood prevention programs, air quality. We've got highways, we've got waste. A lot of these issues are quite renowned in the ward I represent. So it's it's definitely making a positive difference to the city and the county. And I look forward to working with you. And like you said at the start, this is all about everyone working together for the betterment of Gloucestershire. Thank you.
Thanks, Sajid. Over to the officers. Our sat-nav, Sophie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Sophie Benfield. I'm the Democratic Services Advisor for this committee, as well as Economic Growth. So I know we've got a few members that are on both committees. Interesting fact about myself: in my spare time, I do a lot of fundraising for the Alzheimer's Society. There we go.
Well done. It's an issue that's touched us all, I'm sure, particularly in the last year and a half with COVID. Thanks, Sophie. Over to Colin, and then we'll go to Simon after Colin. Colin. First charity fine. Colin, I think you're on mute.
Start, wasn't it? Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Exec Director of Economy, Environment and Infrastructure at Gloucestershire. And I've been in post for about a year, though I was just over a year now, about 18 months. Though I was a consultant who sort of set the new department up for about a year before that. Oh, some interesting things about me which aren't work related. Well, a former athlete, 400-meter runner, but still run, cycle, swim. And when you can get abroad, ski in the winter. So still try to keep fairly active. But there we go.
Thank you, Colin. Over to Simon, and after Simon, we'll go to Kath. Simon.
Good morning. Thanks, Dom. I think most, but not all of you know me. So Simon Excel, the Lead Commissioner for Strategic Infrastructure, working directly to Colin. You'll hear all about me in a few minutes when I do my 10-minute presentation. But what I haven't included is the fact that I'm currently in the process of walking the 5,000 miles coastline of Britain. Not for charity, but perhaps in light of what Sophie said, perhaps I should do. Thank you.
Wow, Simon, that's amazing. I look forward to seeing the pictures. Kath.
Thanks, Chair. My name's Kath. I look after highways. I've been with the County Council for about 15 years, and as Simon says, I'll tell you a little bit more when I get to my presentation. In terms of an interesting fact outside of the work, I do a sport called Canicross, which has the added benefit of letting me go and have a look at all of our public rights of way network. So if I'm not being dragged down a hill by a dog face first, that is. So much fun.
Kath, I didn't realise that was a sport. That happens to me every time I try to take my dog Disraeli out, but I'm going to Google Canicross shortly. Philip, over to you, and then we'll go to Wayne after you, Phil.
Hi there, hi Dom. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Philip Williams, and I'll explain a bit more about my role shortly after with Kath and Simon. I grew up in the Far East and Middle East. I still often forget that I'm not living there, and so people think I do strange things. But I do bring a different perspective sometimes, I hope to think. Just completed demolishing half my house, much to the chagrin of my neighbours, and rebuilding it to a design that I wanted to do. So that's been a bit of a massive effort, but something I've been up to.
Thanks, Philip. It's amazing what we've all managed to achieve during lockdown and other bits and pieces, isn't it? Wayne, over to you.
Good morning. My name is Wayne Lewis. I'm Head of Waste Management at Gloucestershire County Council. Been in the post for just over 3 years or so, I think. Not sure whether it's an interesting fact, but as a long-suffering Welsh football fan, I am enjoying the novelty of seeing Wales compete at a major tournament. I'm very much looking forward to the match tonight against Turkey.
I'm not surprised, Wayne. It's exciting times. Sophie, the two members that didn't join us, are they with us now?
So we have Jill, who's joined the call now, and Alex is on his way. He's just having some technical difficulties.
Amazing. Jill, just ask people to introduce themselves and say something, and one thing about them that's not political or professional. Over to you just very quickly to introduce yourself.
Okay, sorry if I'm late. I had no link, and I was frantically trying to get the link from Dem Services, and also Alex didn't either, but I sent it to him once Michelle sent it to me. So that's why I'm late, and I apologise. One sentence about me. I've got an allotment.
I want to ask other questions about the allotment, but I'll save that for offline, Jill. I think we'll crack on and assume that we'll be joined in due course. I think we'll kick off obviously through the agenda with item 1. There's no apologies. I think, Sophie, I'll wait for thumbs up from you, and we're assuming that we're going to be joined in a moment. In terms of quickly skills and drills, given that we're in this new virtual world. I live in the sticks, and I've got a gerbil going as quickly as it can to give me my broadband. But if I drop out, Sophie will drive, and I'm grateful for people's patience on that. I'll do my best, and I've turned everything else off in the house, so it should be all right. Sophie, over to you for item number 2 on the agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So as members may or may not be aware, the legislation that allowed us to hold these meetings virtually came to an end in May. So any meetings after that point will have to be held in person to be formal. So today's meeting isn't a formal meeting of the committee, and it's an introduction for members to get to know the area. And in that vein, we are unable to formally elect a vice chair for the committee. The reason it was left on the agenda is just for members to be aware, especially new members, that there is a position that will be held for the committee. And just to give you a bit of time to have a think about that before our next meeting in July, which hopefully will be in person, and we can formally elect it at that point. So if there are any questions, please let me know.
I think I'm seeing a hand there from Chris. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Dom. Yes, sorry, Sophie. Does that mean that the next meeting of the Environment Scrutiny Committee will be in person?
It's not confirmed yet, Chris, but we hope that is the case. So it won't be a formal meeting until we're able to do so. So we're doing our absolute best behind the scenes to make that work, and I'll let you all know as soon as I know.
Okay, and that obviously depends on the restrictions, whether they're lifted or not by that time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions, queries, comments, complaints? Not seeing any hands up. Nope. Item 3, declarations of interest. I don't think we've received any. Sophie, any last minutes? Not seeing any hands up. Item 4, introduction to the committee. I think Colin would like to do an overall introduction before we crack on with the the individual presentations. Assuming I've got that right, Colin, over to you.
You're muted, Colin.
Right. Great. Hopefully you can hear me now. That's it. Brilliant. I'm using an iPad and it keeps jamming. Right. For the most part, this committee will be scrutinising the work of what is my department, environment, economy and infrastructure. And the major element of that that the committee will be scrutinising will be the environment side. And my four of my 6 lead commissioners, heads of service, are here this morning to describe in a bit more detail the areas of work that each of them do, and to set the scene to give you that overall understanding of what we do and how we do it. There is the other 2 areas themselves, which is libraries and registration and adult ed, also have, like the rest of the department, do have an effect on the environment in one way or other, in different ways. For example, what we're trying to do from the economy side is to try and roll out, and using adult ed, just to roll out courses and opportunities for people to be trained, particularly at the moment as they're coming out of school and maybe not have even the basic qualifications, and trying to do that, say, with using our libraries to do it. So outreach. So instead of bringing people to Gloucester, we take people, it gives people better access to those facilities, but also obviously helps the travelling side, and particularly given in the more remote areas, it enables people to access. So you can see how the whole department sticks together, even with 2 of those areas not represented here today. So I just wanted to explain about the way we work. And within the department, we have this lovely dichotomy. By dealing with both environment and economy, we are the ones where we're wrestling all the time between those 2 aspects of how we drive the economy forward in the most environmental way, or how we actually really drive forward something on the environment without damaging the economy. So we're actually doing that all the time, wrestling between ourselves. And that's all I really wanted to say. So, it's about achieving that balance going forward. It will always be a balance, because we don't want to go back to living in the Stone Age. And be environmentally absolutely sustainable, for example, but at the same time we don't want to damage our environment in moving forward. And what I'd say is and those 2 aspects come together very, very strongly in terms of environment and economy, in terms of health. And people tend to forget about the big role that EE&I play in health, because the single biggest determinant of health is wealth, and the second after that is about the environment that people live in. So if you can look at those 2 aspects, you can see how we have a massive impact on everyone's life every day. So that's really all I want to say. I'll leave it now to Simon, first of all, and then followed by Philip, Kath, and then Wayne, about how those 4 aspects of our 6 areas we work in really affect this committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. I think it is me now. Sophie, are you okay to chuck the slides up?
Hoping they are on their way. Can you see those members?
I can.
Yeah,
that's good, my end, Sophie.
Perfect.
Excellent. Well, I think I've already introduced myself, Sophie, so we can go straight to slide 2. It's going to be a bit clunky, but there we go. Thank you. Okay. So Gloucestershire is a growing county. It's also a very constrained county. This is a slide not of the whole of Gloucestershire, but of what we call the central Severn Vale in the centre. And this is where, in the region of 60 to 65% of future growth will be located. So the constraints are huge. We've got to the east, the pink area. That's an area of outstanding natural beauty, the Cotswolds. The green in the middle is the green belt, the ever decreasing green belt. We've got the blue, which is the active floodplain, and I'll come on to my team's flood responsibilities shortly. We've got the Forest of Dean to the west. And in the middle, where we're not constrained, we've got a lot of growth. So we've obviously got Cheltenham and Gloucester. That looks very different to how it did when I joined the county council back in the late 90s. Difficult to see probably, but the gist of it is that the yellow is allocated sites for development. some of which indeed have actually come forward to part construction now. The blue is under construction. Again, some of that has been completed since this slide was produced. The purple are future safeguarded sites, quite significant ones to the northwest of Cheltenham and to the west of Cheltenham. And red are potential emerging sites as well, most of which to the south of Gloucester and Stroud district. It's not the County Council's role nor responsibility to dictate where future housing and employment land is located. That's the job of the district councils. They're the local planning authorities. They're the ones who produce the local plans, and in the case of Gloucester, Cheltenham and Tewkesbury, a joint core strategy. What we can do and what we try to do is heavily influence the quantum and location and type of future development, and this is important not least because the County Council has a plethora of roles and responsibilities, such as Highway Authority, which Kath will come on to shortly, Transport Authority, Education Authority, Library Authority, Lead Local Flood Authority, Waste Planning Authority, Waste Disposal Authority, which Wayne's going to come on to, Minerals Planning Authority. The list goes on and on. That's certainly not an exhaustive list. And one of my key roles is to ensure, or at least try to ensure, that all of the relevant and required infrastructure, strategic infrastructure, is provided as that growth emerges. And a key aspect of that is our close working relationships with all sorts of different partners, such as the district councils, other infrastructure providers, stakeholders and developers. If we can scroll down to the next slide, please, Sophie. Well, I've mentioned that we're Lead Local Flood Authority. This is obviously a photo dating back to the devastating 2007 floods. We've had several flood events since then, none as severe nor extreme as this one, but the most recent one was probably the worst we've had since 2007, which was around Christmas of last year. Since this flood event in 2008, we've ring-fenced monies solely for flood alleviation purposes. So that comes into my team's budget and some to Kath's team's budget. We spend a minimum, and it is a minimum, of £2.1 million per annum on flood alleviation. In reality, that figure is significantly greater than that. I've got an excellent flood team who excel at funding and commissioning flood alleviation works across the county on a prioritised basis. And my team also comment on all major planning applications to ensure that the districts and indeed developers are fully aware of the impact of their proposals, and we ensure that they're aware of how to mitigate any flood risk in that respect. If we can go to the next slide, please, Sophie. Now, Gloucestershire is a predominantly rural county. 2/3 of the county is covered by areas of outstanding natural beauty. There's 3 in total: the Cotswolds, Wye Valley and Malvern Hills. The County Council and my team have a statutory responsibility and duty to produce AONB management plans for all of those 3 areas. Those are dealt with through our partnership working with AONB boards. Rural areas, as Phil might come on to in a second, comes with all sorts of different problems and pressures. High house prices, especially in the Cotswolds, lack of employment opportunities. The employment that is there can be quite low paid, limited services, lack of public transport and general connectivity issues, not least broadband, which again I'll come on to in a sec. If we can go to the next slide, please, Sophie. Now, Gloucestershire is rich in heritage. Gloucester and Cirencester were obviously both important Roman settlements. I've got a very dedicated archaeological team who comment on plan applications. We comment on countryside stewardship schemes, and I've got a finds liaison officer who comes in with all sorts of wonderful objects from days gone by. Quite often there's a conflict between archaeology and my ecology teams and future developments and developers, but we try the best we can to ensure that we enable development, but not to the detriment of the county's valuable history. I sit, or certainly pre-COVID, I sat with my archaeological team, and it's wonderful what they come up with quite often. And this is an example of a 4th century find which came into our keeping a few years ago in 2017, and it's a wonderful part of a Roman hoard which was found, and it made national news. Next slide, please, Sophie. Well, this is Phil's house, I think, in light of what he said a second ago. So House building, there's a lot of it going on. We are anticipating between 3,000 and 4,000 houses each year to come forward in Gloucestershire. This photograph is a familiar sight, not just in Gloucestershire, but indeed across the whole of the country at present, with the push for additional houses. Next slide, please, Sophie. Now, I don't have time to answer these questions in any detail because I get involved in planning appeals and inquiries where QCs spend weeks on end answering these questions, putting forward their views. But the gist of it is that we need more houses for two reasons. Firstly, for the existing population. Even with a static population, we need additional houses due to the lowering average household size. And the other half, give or take, is for in-migration. We are an importer of people, rightly or wrongly. In that respect, Gloucestershire is obviously a popular place to come to, not least to retire in the Cotswolds. Again, that brings all sorts of issues and problems for the County Council. As I said, it's the district councils who produce the local plans and the joint course strategy, not us, but we are a key partner, probably the key partner to the districts in that respect. We have a statutory duty to cooperate with the districts, and we do so heavily in all of their emerging plans. Similarly, parish councils and town councils produce neighbourhood plans, and again, we comment on all of those as they emerge. And as I've already alluded to, we comment on all plan applications that come forward in terms of all of our different statutory roles and responsibilities to ensure that the districts and the developers are fully aware of our views and indeed concerns if there are any. And also, finally, for this slide, my team have a statutory responsibility to produce all sorts of different plans, some of which are mentioned there. So those refer to the Minerals Local Plan, which we relatively recently adopted, the Waste Course Strategy, which we're in the process of reviewing, the Local Transport Plan, which again we recently adopted, and the Local Flood Risk Management Strategy, which again I've got through Cabinet not that long ago. The list goes on. We've always got a lot of plans and policies to make and adhere to. Again, next slide, please, Sophie. I've got another team that negotiate and secure developer contributions. So these historically have been in the region of in excess of £10 million per annum. And it's vital to get these monies to ensure that the impact of future growth is mitigated. Most of the developer contributions goes to those 4 bullet points there: education, libraries, flood alleviation, transport and highways. But again, that's not an exhaustive list. We've got a local development guide, which has relatively recently gone through Cabinet, which again enhances our ability to negotiate and secure these monies with developers in the districts. We haven't been helped, unfortunately, with the introduction of the community infrastructure levy. This has very much been put the ball in the court of the district councils, not the county councils, to secure developer contributions in most instances, not all instances. And again, it's a battle which we have quite often with the districts and developers to try to ensure that we secure the required monies for future strategic infrastructure. Next slide, please, Sophie. I'm probably going to be out of time, so I'll probably leave most of the highways and transport stuff to Kath, but certainly my team bid for, usually quite successfully, monies for huge major strategic infrastructure. This is an example at GCHQ to the west of Cheltenham, where we've secured £23 million for enabling infrastructure in that area. But there's the A417 missing link, there's the M5 Junction 10 project, M5 Junction 9 project, the list goes on. In total, billions of pounds worth of strategic infrastructure, which is hopefully coming to Gloucestershire in due course. But again, I think Kath will lead on that. Next slide, please, Sophie. So final three slides from me. I mentioned minerals and the Minerals Local Plan. Gloucestershire is a very mineral-rich county, and we have the responsibility as Mineral Planning Authority to dictate the quantum and location of all future mineral extraction. We deal with that through the Minerals Local Plan and through planning applications which we determine. This can be quite controversial aspect of my job, especially when we are putting quarries or extensions to quarries in the Cotswolds area of outstanding natural beauty. But obviously with minerals, we're very much constrained as to where the minerals is, and Cotswold limestone is by definition only found in the Cotswolds. So that's quite an interesting aspect of the job and role. Penultimate slide for me, at least, Sophie, thank you. Waste, Wayne will deal with this in a lot greater detail than I, but what I would say is that I'm the Waste Planning Authority, Wayne is the Waste Disposal Authority, so it's my job to ensure that we've got an up-to-date Waste Local Plan and Waste Core Strategy, which again dictates the location and the ability for us to manage and recycle as much as we can of Gloucestershire's waste. And my final slide, please, Sophie. So this is Fastershire. This is our award-winning broadband rollout jointly with Herefordshire Council. It's a very successful project. Whether we've got to the chair's house, I'm not quite sure in light of his comment earlier, but we can take that offline. We've certainly done exceptionally well to get superfast broadband to over 97% of the county's houses, and it's my task and dream to get the remaining 3% as best we can. But there's a reason why they haven't been done so far, because they're in the difficult category. But we're working on it, and if the chair's house is one of those, then I'll have to take that offline. So I think that's my 10 minutes. I think we're going to deal with questions at the end of the presentation. So if members are happy with that and Sophie's happy with that, I think I'm passing over to Phil. Thank you.
Dom, it's Councillor Priest. Can I just give an update on a major incident in Lydney that's happened this morning, please, which sort of affects us?
Just with the caveat that we are live on the interweb. Sophie, can you just confirm whether we need to go off internet for the update?
I just think it's a bit of a news update that I've been briefed by one of my district councillors in Lydney.
Yeah, Alan, I'm just checking whether or not we can put it into open source, that's all. Sophie?
As long as it's not sensitive information,
Yeah.
Alan, that's fine.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think so. A lorry has hit the barriers at Lydney railway station this morning. Some of you know the crossing. So the road to Lydney docks is currently closed. British Transport Police are there, along with Network Rail. The railway itself is still open, albeit the trains are going very, very slowly. So at the moment, there is no access at all whatsoever to the Lydney Industrial Estate. So that happened about an hour ago. Thank you.
Crikey, thank you, Alan. That's really useful. And just whilst we're handing over the mic to Philip, Simon, thank you for that tour de force. Not the first time I've been put in the difficult box, but really grateful to you for covering such a huge amount in that presentation. And my instincts are we'll probably come back to that when we're thinking about work plans and fascinating opportunities and challenges to populate our future meetings. Philip, that looks like we're handing over to you now.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I'm the Lead Commissioner for Community Infrastructure, which is, I would say, best to think of as a slightly more diverse spread of services, So I've put some of the key areas here with a sense of the scale to give you that kind of feel, because we've got managers who is responsible for school transport, public transport, development, climate change, and operationally, keeping signals working on the roads, dealing with public rights of way diversions. And also an internal team that does the business administration for all of us. So it is pretty diverse, and at times I wish it was easier to sort of get a bit more overlap. But when you're managing gypsy and travellers sites, it's not always a good idea to get the travellers to manage the home to school transport, even though they're called travellers. They should be able to do the travelling stuff. But it's part of our challenge. So you could move on to the next slide, please, Sophie. that's just a little bit of a see who we are, and there are more of us, but I've just tried to show the main heads of the teams, and the new arrivals in the teams. In fact, we've got a chap called Nathan Drover who joined us from Essex to take up management of the Highways Development Management team in January, and Mike Collins, who's an interim consultant, who's taken over road safety since Andrew Parker Mowbray decided to retire early in March. Thank you, Sophie. So our key areas. I'm conscious that many of you are also district councillors, a pretty high level of sort of what we call twin-hatted members, and really for us to make a difference, I think the public of Gloucestershire expect cooperation and reasonable cooperation, and I think this is the challenge for us. Gloucestershire's you will come across many of the things that we are going to be considering as a committee, and the work that many of my officers do, you will come across indirectly, possibly directly, in the district council work, or even at parish councils and other areas. And so the quality of our relationships is really important, and you are a really important channel for us to be able to understand how each of us sort of works, and what our priorities are. So I really value your kind of local knowledge and the knowledge and the connections that you have with your own district councils, where you have those where you are district councillors. And so just coming across some of the key areas, I'd like to say that I think we need to go back a little bit and understand, what are we trying to achieve. So if you do get a chance to have a look at the council strategy, there has been a lot of work in the past to try and understand the challenges of Gloucestershire and making us a magnet county. A lot of young people leave Gloucestershire to go for education outside, and they don't necessarily return, and we lose that talent, we lose that dynamism and energy, and they may come back in their early 30s or a bit later, but the services that are in my team that deal with things like housing and development, and transport are key to the quality of life that people expect in a place. Increasingly, when they come back, they want to be able to catch a bus. They don't want to be stuck in the middle of nowhere, reliant on their parents to take them somewhere, let's say. So it's a real challenge for us to have to make the money stretch and to have sort of reasonable policies, and also to keep innovating, making sure that transport is not the transport that got us into the climate crisis, but it's the type of transport that will get us out of the climate crisis. I'll start with HDM, Highways Development Management, a team that does a lot of liaison with local planning authorities to provide the highway authorities consultation sort of advice on the appropriateness of the highways aspects of new development. So there'll be types of new junctions, whether the roads need improving, whether we need better pedestrian footways, cycleways, public transport services that could be funded. Are there any safety issues in the area that the development could make worse? This sort of thing. So there's a lot of close working with district councils and planning committees and planning officers there. It's a very polarised area. Generally speaking, most local people don't want development on their doorstep. So you find yourselves in the middle, sort of, with the developers and us strategically wanting to get development for jobs and housing, but when it comes to the nitty-gritty, that means someone's going to be looking out not over a field possibly, but into a new estate or a development. So it does generate quite strong opinions. ITU is generally speaking, we have a social responsibility and a social duty to provide transport, which is a critical factor in people's well-being and employment prospects and educational prospects. And so we have subsidised public transport, and certain groups of younger people get free transport to school, which is what we arrange. But a good way of remembering this is that out of about 22 million public transport trips made in Gloucestershire each year, about 10% are made on the ones that we pay for, that the taxpayer pays for and we organise. And these tend to be the ones, the bus services that go to the quieter locations, quieter times of the day and the week, and maybe on Sundays and in the evenings. We're also busy expanding the active travel, that's the sort of jargon for walking and cycling, work of the council. We work closely with schools on bikeability and school crossing patrols, and we're also coordinating an e-scooter pilot in Cheltenham and Gloucester. The last point in the ITU is fleet management for the whole authority, which is something that we're responsible for, and making that greener. Network management, highway network management, is sort of a bit more conventional highways, you might think. We've got all the on-street parking, deciding how you're going to use that space, because everyone's got a different priority. And when it comes to your post bags or emails, parking is one of those ones that you're likely to see in there. So if it's whether it's residence parking zones in urban areas, or dealing with how do we deal with the sort of pressure of tourism in Cotswold villages, all sorts of things like that. Road safety is a statutory responsibility. It sits technically under adult social care and communities scrutiny, but there are really obvious crossovers here. We know that people who don't feel safe will drive, and driving then makes some people who want to walk and cycle, puts them off. So we've got to make sure that both drivers and pedestrians, everybody, is safe on our roads. We're responsible, as I mentioned earlier, for signals and things like highway records, which is the searches when you move house, finding out that the highway comes up to your gate or whatever. The team that's been very small for a long time and now is changing, which is good, is the sustainability or the climate change team, also responsible for air quality coordination work. We've had some really good progress in the last 15 years or so. We've cut our emissions as a council by over 73%. If you take into account the energy from waste and the renewable element of that, it's actually almost 100% since 2005. But we've got a long way to go as a county. So that's where we're expanding considerably, and investing in EV chargers, renewable energy, solar panels on the Shire Hall, tree planting, and other measures to improve air quality. And the last one on this list, Gypsy and Travellers sites. We have 4 sites with just under 400 people living in them, a bit less than that. And it's been a sort of overlooked part of the council's work, possibly in the past. And we're really keen to, with a new manager, we've been investing in the quality of their accommodation, and we're looking at ways of making energy more affordable for them and improving access to health and other services. We also, when you've got travellers unauthorised encampments on bits of land that are county land, we help with the liaison to move them on. Thanks, Sophie. Just my last slide, there's a little bit of overlap, so I'll try and be brief. I think the key thing here, as I've summed up, is to give us healthier, safer, and more sustainable choices, particularly for transport. We're coming out of the COVID pandemic with a real kind of sight set on economic recovery and growth. But COVID, as well as health impacts, it has scarred some of our transport services. Bus services have been really hammered. And but then on the other hand, we've had a boom at the same time in new housing and development. So we've got improvement plans to boost, and we have been boosting the staffing in development management and the skills there. We're working with the districts to get new development in the right place. And we're working with bus operators to improve their services and get some real firm commitments there. The climate change challenge is enormous, and we're recruiting. As I speak, we've got 2 recruitment processes underway, one jointly with Waste. And I'm really pleased to say tomorrow Cabinet will be asked to consider reports on investing in 1,000 electric vehicle charge points, which is a really massive ambition here and a fantastic story to help us all to be able to do our bit when we decide that the time comes to change that car and get an electric vehicle. We've got also a Cabinet decision on the Rural Mobility Fund, which is 2 community transport services, one in the south of the Forest of Dean and one in the North Cotswolds. So we've got £1.3 million from the government for that. Another really good story that help people in rural areas with real choices for how to get around. The scooter trials are going to be extended until the end of March next year as part of a government decision there. We're investing in a £20 million transport hub at Arle Court, and we've also got school streets pilots, which I think we'll cover separately due to time. The network management area, some of the challenges we've got is some aging traffic signals. It doesn't need a rocket scientist to work out what would happen if they start falling over or just simply don't work. So we've got big investment and sort of work going on there. We're reviewing parking constantly as the world changes and our needs change, so the type of parking we need changes. And we're also working with the police and other partners on road safety. I mentioned a bit about the Gypsy and Travellers previously. A last point really is just to say, we've been in touch with lots of authorities about investing in active travel. We've got some fantastic proposals across the county, including the Cheltenham-Gloucester cycle route, the B4063, which will be a flagship scheme. No councils have magicked the skills to deliver these schemes in a space of a few weeks. It takes time to build your capacity. We are really, really focusing on that, but it's great having ambitions. The next stage is delivering on them, and that's a piece of work that me and my colleagues are really committed to and getting on with. So thank you.
Philip, thank you, Catherine. Thank you for sharing how we can exploit opportunities to improve livelihoods and the environment. I had a flashback, which was a bit like This Country from the BBC, if anyone's seen the comedy, of how dependent I was on my parents for transport and getting around the county, and really excited about some of those innovative schemes that you mentioned there. So thank you. Kath, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think Sophie's going to share the slides for me.
I'm having a bit of freezing on my internet browser, Kath, so if you want to start, and I'll share them as quickly as I can.
Okay, brilliant. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kath Howarth. I think it's probably fair to say it's only my mother that calls me Catherine, so feel free to call me Kath when we do come into contact with each other. I've been with GCC for about 15 years now, previously with Cheltenham Borough Council, and prior to that with Devon County Council. So been a local authority track for me, but also it's given me quite an interesting perspective with having worked in a district council as well as shire authorities. The highways team that I look after is really all about the delivery of the highway service, from the maintenance of what we've got to the construction of what we need. So it's very much the hands-on, on the ground kind of stuff that you're out there. Across the team as a whole, we've got about 120, just over 120 full-time or full-time equivalents. But what that doesn't take into account are all the external providers that we work with very, very closely to deliver the services. So it's a big team. I was going to show you on the first slide the two key parts of the team, but I will try and describe it. I think you've got the slides in your pack anyway. Oh, there we go. Look, as if by magic, Sophie's got it there in time, which is brilliant. Thank you, Sophie. So I'm not going to reel off a whole load of stats as you'll come into knowledge of these over time, especially as you get to know about our asset management plan and those sorts of things. But I think it is worth understanding the scale of the network that we look after. We have over 3,500 miles of carriageway or highway. That includes the footways alongside, the cycleways alongside, the verges, the basically from hedge to hedge, if you like, if you want to describe it like that. We have the same again, another 3,500 miles of public rights of way network, which is not to be underestimated, especially after the last year we've had. Over 1,000 bridges, tens of thousands of streetlights, drainage assets, and those sorts of things. The scale of it is quite large, and I think it's something that often when we're in conversation with you, we're obviously thinking about the whole county and how much we have to deliver across the whole network, and it's trying to resolve, if you like, that battle that we always have between dealing with a local issue and dealing with the network as a whole. On the left-hand side of the picture there, you can see my operations team headed up by Jenny Goodson. I'll go into those in a little more detail a bit later on, but we've got area teams who look after the day-to-day operations across the county, as well as customer, councillor and parish contact. We also have a risk manager who deals with our policies and statutory defences. And last but not least, we have the public rights of way team who, as I've described, look after 3,500 miles worth of public rights of way network. On the right-hand side, you've essentially got the capital delivery side of the business. So these are large projects on either the strategic road network, such as Junction 10 or Junction 9, or on the local road network. Also major resurfacing, geotechnical and bridge work, street lighting, those sorts of things. We also have a customer contact team who answer all our calls, our emails and online reports, which is separate from the corporate contact centre team, because Highways generates quite a lot of calls, as you may well have experienced already in your post bags. Next slide, please, Sophie. So the key areas that we look after, maintaining and operating the network, it covers both routine and emergency works. It's also a 24/7 service, although we respond to emergencies out of hour. We're not an emergency service, obviously, but I'm sure you'll all be aware when we have situations like storm events, flooding, gritting the network over the winter, those sorts of things, and even the things like road traffic accidents, road traffic collisions that happen on our network out of the normal working hours. Our teams are involved in dealing with all of those sorts of incidents, and they're probably helping to manage that road closure that's been mentioned earlier by Councillor Priest. I'll go into a little more on contracts shortly, but we do manage 4 key contracts, really. They're the biggest ones that we have in terms of delivering the services, and as I say, I'll come on to those shortly. We have a Highway Skills Academy, which focuses on apprentices and construction skills. And I think one of the probably key areas that you will get involved in with us is the local area teams. They're their primary point of contact for most for councillors and for most parishes and customers. And the LHM is a really key, valuable. The local highways manager is a really key and valuable contact to develop a productive working relationship with. They can help to prioritise. They can help to point you in the right direction. And they're there to help you try and achieve what you want to in the context of sort of the wider GCC policies that we might have, and understanding, making sure we've got consistency across the county and those sort of things. They'll also help you to prioritise and allocate your £30,000 of highways local money every year. Certainly this year. How much it'll be next year, we will have to wait and see, but it's £30,000 which needs to be allocated, and we need to know about so that we can ask our contractors to deliver that within the financial year. Public rights of way I have mentioned, and the customer service team I've mentioned. Capital Programme team I've also mentioned just on the previous slide, but in terms of moving it on, I think one of the key things that we are progressing at the moment is the ash dieback programme, and I will come on to that in a little more detail later. It's a very key piece of work for us at the moment, and it sort of plays straight into that dichotomy that Colin mentioned right at the beginning about managing competing demands on the network. Next slide, please, Sophie. So contract arrangements. As I said, there's 4 key contracts that we have. Our term maintenance contract is with Ringway. They provide all our day-to-day routine operations and things. Professional services contract is with Atkins. Structural maintenance with Tarmac. So structural maintenance, I want to talk about that. That is basically resurfacing and renewal of carriageways, footways, cycleways, those sorts of things. And we have a street lighting contract as well with M Group. I think it's probably important to point out here that it's for us as officers, that one of our important roles is to work across all 4 of those contracts, or all the contracts that we have, to deliver one service to the public. The public don't really care who's delivering what. Well, you probably know that already as councillors. They don't really care whether it's the district council or the county council. They just want the service delivered, and that's one of our aims as part of the highway services, is why we call ourselves Gloucestershire Highways. It's not about the term maintenance contract. It's not about the street lighting contract. It's about delivering a highway service. And the Skills Academy is a really important focus for us. There is a huge construction industry skills shortage. We have an ageing workforce in the construction industry. We have a lot of other large projects going on across the country or about to come online, things like HS2, Hinckley, all of those sorts of big projects draw a huge amount of the construction resource away from areas like us. And it's also really hard for us to compete with the private sector. We are often looking for, well, along with our partners, we're often looking for people that have got HGV licenses so that they can drive our gritters or our lorries and those sorts of things. But competing with haulage companies and those sorts of things is really difficult. Our answer to all of that is to start growing our own talent, really. It's a long-term aspiration, starts with apprenticeships at all levels, and being able to provide a career progression pathway for individuals that join us so that they can see a way to progress through our organisations. And that's across all of our organisations, not just GCC, but the ones that you see there, so that they can get experience in all of these different areas. And we attract people into the industry for the benefit of the wider industry, the wider economy, and those sorts of things. Next slide, please, Sophie. Key contract with Ringway is for our term maintenance contract. This is about delivering day-to-day maintenance operations on the network. We started in April 2019. It's potentially up to an 11-year contract, over £20 million per annum spent through the contract, and it covers all of those sorts of areas that I've listed on the slide there. And I think, and it will go for all the contracts that I'm just going to mention very briefly in the next 2 slides. I think it's fair to say that for all of our contracts, the last 12 to 15 months has been extremely challenging. The COVID lockdown hit us before we'd even reached the end of our first mobilisation year with these new contracts, which has meant a lot of new or adjusted arrangements had to be put in place in order to manage social distancing, but also enable our teams to keep working on the ground and keep delivering the sort of safety focused works that we needed to make sure we're still going on out there. Next slide, please, Sophie. Our professional services contract, on the other hand, is with Atkins. The details are there. This is very much about that sort of specialist design consultancy support that we bring in from outside, and particularly around delivering key projects like Junction 10 and some of those larger schemes where there's a lot of expertise that we don't hold in-house. We work really closely with our professional services contracts. So they help us to make sure that we've got designs for schemes coming forward, helping on bids and those sorts of things as well. Next slide, please, Sophie. And the last one I'm going to mention in any kind of detail is structural maintenance contract with Tarmac. This is a very short contract. We're currently in the second of a 2-year contract. We will be retendering later this year for the next structural maintenance contract, around about 15 to 20 million pounds annually, and that does exactly what it says on the tin and gets resurfacing schemes out there on the network, and renewal of surfaces from patching schemes through to full-scale resurfacing. I haven't done a separate slide for the street lighting contract. That particular is a much smaller contract, it's around £2 million a year, and that did novate from a company called Skanska earlier this year to Milestone Group, and that one runs up until 2027. So when we do have to retender these contracts, it is a major exercise because the value of the contract, the value of the works going through the contract and the length of time they are. Longer contracts are generally better for us. It allows us to develop better processes and working practices with those providers to make sure that we can get best effective use of the funds that we've got to put through those contracts. Next slide, please, Sophie. Very briefly, I'm just going to focus on the area teams because they will be a key contact for all members. There are 4 areas across the county, north, south, east and west. We have depots in all of them. We have 2 depots in the east area, one in Morton, one in Ciren. And you should have received an email in the last day or 2 from Jenny Goodson, the Highways Operations Manager, about how to deal with all of the practical highway matters day to day. And that will cover a lot of the detail that you need to know. But they are the first point of contact for all things highways within your area or any other member's area. And I think it's probably worth saying this is a bit of this is quite a tough gig. And there are lots of competing demands. There we have operational peaks and troughs if we've got storm events or flooding or winter and those sorts of things. And they've got significant numbers of customers and parishes and councillors to look after. Next slide, please, Sophie. This map should have come to you as part of that email, which shows you the areas that they look after. And typically a local highways manager will look after between 3 and 8 councillors' areas and their respective parishes, depending on the geography of the county. They're ably assisted in the area teams in depots at, as I said, Ciren and Morton in Marsh. We've also got one at Stroud, one at Bamfurlong and one in Canop in the Forest. And it's worth a moment on the geography. We're a large shire county with 7 estuary running up the middle. We've got, as others have mentioned, AONBs, we've got high ground, we've got low ground, we've got flood areas, we've got 2 urban conurbations very close together, all of which we have to sort of factor into the operational picture in terms of how we deal with things and where we put people and those sorts of things. Thanks, Sophie. And last, but by no means least, are our highways projects. I'm going to pick out a couple of key points here. We've got M5 Junction 10, which many of you attended the preferred route announcement presentations yesterday about. A massive scheme for us. It is a massive scheme for Gloucestershire, and we're really looking forward to that one continuing to run forward. There's lots of information out there about that one. We also have a major projects programme on the local road network, anything from the B4063 cycle scheme, which you will have heard about, I'm sure, the West of Cheltenham transport infrastructure scheme that's on site. We've recently finished a major bridge scheme on the A38 canal, which basically goes over the A38 for the canal. And we also get very involved with district councils and helping to deliver some of the priorities that they want to put forward, where we perhaps have the expertise or ability to deliver things and work in partnership with them. And a good example of that is the Ashchurch Bridge in Tewkesbury. Ash dieback, I did say I would mention very briefly. It's a major programme for us, this one. It's a key issue for a lot of authorities. Ash dieback affects ash trees across the whole country. Estimates for Gloucestershire say we're likely to have upwards of 30,000 highway trees needing to be addressed, and not all trees, in fact most trees that you'll see out there are not highway trees, so this is a major issue. We have a programme of dealing with the ones that we have identified as diseased. Oftentimes that means, or nearly always that means, us needing to fell those trees. We are replacing 2 for each one that we do have to fell, but that is a necessary programme of work that we need to do, because the problem with ash dieback is that the trees can fail catastrophically, and when they are on the highway boundary, that is a massive safety concern for us. And then we have capital programme delivery and structural maintenance. So this will be anything from your small scale pedestrian refuge that wants to go in to large scale geotechnical landslip schemes that need to put a road back where it should be. Similarly, structural maintenance, our approach to resurfacing roads is asset based. It is based on data. We have road condition surveys that are carried out alongside more current data, which tells us about how roads have deteriorated over a preceding winter and those sorts of things. And that is, we prioritise renewing our highway asset on the basis of data wherever we possibly can do and have that data. It's rarely perfect. We rarely have perfect solutions. There are lots of competing demands, but lots and lots going on, and it keeps us really busy, and we look forward to working with you. Thanks, Sophie.
Kath, thank you for that, and thank you for outlining the scale of your task, and to the team. I know you're running a lot of gangs at the moment to try and get on top of the mailbag that we're probably all sharing at the moment. Wayne, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Yes, Wayne Lewis, head of the waste management team. We're a small team, just 8 full-time employees, but we're managing a annual revenue budget of some 35 million and a small capital works programme too. Next slide, please, Sophie. Just wanted to cover 3 main things this morning. Firstly, just a quick run through the roles and responsibilities for waste management in Gloucestershire. Set out the general approach that's taken to tackling the waste management problem, and then say a little bit about what we do locally in terms of action. Thank you. So there are a number of different agencies, parties involved in waste management, and their roles are set out in law. Regulation is the job of the Environment Agency in England, so they're responsible for providing any sort of waste facility, any regulated facility with an environmental permit, monitoring the conditions of that permit and taking action where they need to against sites. As we heard earlier, the County Council has a role as the Waste Planning Authority. That function sits within Simon's team. The County Council is also the Waste Disposal Authority, and that's my bit. More to come on that. And then the district councils are the waste collection authorities. So we do need to work very closely with our district council partners. Were Gloucestershire an unitary area, those 2 functions of Waste Disposal Authority and Collection Authority would be combined. Thank you, Sophie. So the County Council's role as Waste Disposal Authority, as the name suggests, involves the treatment and disposal of all household waste collected across the county. We're also responsible for providing residents with household recycling centres, places where they can dispose of their waste that isn't suitable for putting out in the curbside collections. We have a network of 5 sites across the county. The districts then will collect household waste. They do the doorstep curbside recycling collections, the food waste collections. They're also responsible for street cleaning and clearance of fly tipping as well. Together, we have some shared non-statutory roles. We've recently formed the Gloucestershire Resources and Waste Partnership with district councils, and that partnership has 2 main functions: to develop a long-term strategic framework for waste management across the county, and also to come together and work together on communications and community involvement functions as well. Thanks, Sophie. This diagram schematic attempts to just sort of highlight what the issues are with waste management. The disposal costs, if you like, are just the sort of tip of the iceberg. In Gloucestershire, that's a £35 million per year problem, but there's much more beneath that. For every item that's discarded, there's an awful lot gone into that product on the way through in terms of natural resources, the energy costs associated with production, the logistics, the use of that product, labour costs and everything else. So in truth, the true cost of waste is about 10 times the disposal cost. So our 35 million a year problem becomes a 350 million pounds per year issue across Gloucestershire. Thank you, Sophie. The broad approach that we take to tackling waste is set out in the waste hierarchy. This is enshrined in law, so all councils, all businesses have a responsibility to consider the waste hierarchy when making their waste management decisions. It's an inverted pyramid, the goal being to do more of the stuff at the top and less of the stuff at the bottom. In practice, I think what we have is a diamond shape. We do a lot of recycling, we do a lot of recovery, very little disposal nowadays, but actually not very much prevention and reuse as well that we can quantify. So the actual fact is we have a diamond at the moment. The goal has to be that inverted triangle. Thank you, Sophie. Back in 2019, we did an in-depth waste compositional analysis. So we looked through the residual bins across Gloucestershire, across all the districts, and this is what we found. The biggest component, other than the non-recyclable stuff, the biggest component is food waste. It makes up a quarter of what people throw away across Gloucestershire. And then the other materials are as listed. And what you can see there is that there are already recycling collection services available for most of these materials. So the art is getting residents to put the right stuff in the right bin most of the time so that we can reduce the amount going into the residual waste stream. Composition changes over time as well. I've been in the waste management business for 20 years plus now, I guess, and I've seen composition change. Food waste has always been high, but nowadays we are seeing more card with the growth of online retailers, home shopping. There's more plastic in the waste stream. There's less paper with fewer people buying a newspaper on a regular basis. So we do need to adapt and respond to those compositional changes which reflect societal changes. Thank you, Sophie. Yes, we can skip over that one, Sophie. So just some examples of action that we take locally. We focus on waste prevention, have a number of projects there. We promote the use of real nappies over disposables. We offer some trial packs to new parents. We also offer a voucher scheme that gives new parents some money off real nappy packs. It's an expensive life stage, and one of the barriers to people trying real nappies is that you have to buy quite a bit of kit up front. So this attempts to overcome that barrier, that cost issue. And we've got about 500 new parents taking up that offer each year at the moment. We have a network of master composters. These are volunteers that go around the county providing advice and information on composting at home. So pre-COVID times, they would typically attend local fairs and events and talks at different places to promote home composting. We also make the home composting containers available. They're available for purchase via our website. And over the last 20 years, we've shifted 30 or 40,000 of them. The annual sales are much lower now, but it's still a service that we offer. And lastly, we try and support and promote community reuse and community action projects on waste and climate change issues. This is something that we're keen to do more with, and as Philip mentioned earlier, we are recruiting for a post to do more sort of community engagement to try and champion and promote and knit together all that community-led action on waste and climate change issues, which I think can be very powerful. Thank you, Sophie. So together with our district council partners, we develop an annual communications plan, which we take to the Resources and Waste Partnership meeting for approval by members from each of our councils. And the sorts of things that we do, we provide instructional information. This is the nuts and bolts, what goes in each bin, what you can recycle at home, when your collections are, that basic instructional stuff that everybody needs. We then have material specific campaigns. As the composition analysis showed, we know what's out there, we know what materials we need to target, both in terms of the quantity of waste that we're collecting, but also we understand the impact that different waste streams have on the environment as well. So we try and target not only those materials that there's a lot of, but also those that have a higher environmental impact as well. So we have campaigns on plastics and food waste and other waste streams as well. The next one that we'll be doing quite soon is on metals, a valuable resource, infinitely recyclable. So trying to encourage people to recycle their metal tins and cans more effectively. And then we also do seasonal campaigns as well. There are certain times during the year when people generate more waste. Christmas is a classic example, at the times like Halloween with pumpkins and things like that as well. So we'll try and target events during the year as well and promote a waste reduction and recycling message. Thank you, Sophie. In terms of our recycling activities, the district councils have comprehensive curbside collection systems in place. We support those with the payment of recycling credits to them. We also have a locally agreed incentive payment that we make to the district councils. This is in recognition of the avoided disposal costs that would otherwise fall to the county council had we needed to dispose of that waste. So by the promoting district recycling efforts, you know, it's a win-win. Districts have food waste collections and garden waste collections in place. Our role there is to provide the bulking, the transfer, and the treatment contracts that deal with the materials that they collect. So those things go hand in glove. As I mentioned, we have a network of 5 household recycling centres. They are managed under contract for us by Ubico, our local authority-owned company, of which the county council is a shareholder. And my team is also responsible for marketing, selling the waste streams collected there. So we have contracts in place with upwards of 25 different materials off-takers for materials. We have a county-wide recycling rate of 51% at the moment. That's above the national average of 45%, which is great. But in all honesty, the local rate and the national rate has stagnated in recent years. And there is a need for continued investment to make sure that that figure goes in the right direction. There are arguments about the merits of weight-based targets. You know, you shouldn't necessarily just chase tonnage to improve your recycling performance. It's more important to target the right materials and reduce our overall environmental impact. But nevertheless, albeit a relatively crude indicator, the percentage recycling rate is still an important measure against which we benchmark ourselves. Next slide, please, Sophie. Then when we've exhausted our prevention, reuse and recycling efforts, there's a recovery stage. I'm sure you'll have seen the energy from waste facility just south of Gloucester on the M5, the Javelin Park facility that opened in October 2019. The contract's managed by my team. That's now processing around 130,000 tonnes of Gloucestershire's residual household waste each year. It's massively reduced our reliance on landfilling, so we landfill very little as a county now. Instead, that material is used to generate energy, enough to power around 25,000 homes each year. And that has run very effectively for us over the last 18 months or so. We have sort of put a ring around it to protect it from potential COVID impacts. It's a critical piece of infrastructure for us, as are all of our waste treatment contracts. So we've had, a strong emphasis on sort of COVID security to make sure that those facilities continue to be available to us over the last year or so. Next slide, please, Sophie. When COVID restrictions ease, Chair, I'd very much like to invite you and the committee to visit the facility if it would be of interest to you. Until that time, I will have to make do with a quick schematic, just a brief run through the process. Looking at the diagram from left to right, waste is delivered in, it's tipped into a bunker before being loaded by crane through a chute onto a grate where it's combusted, where it's burned. That combustion process is used to heat water in a boiler that produces steam. Steam drives a turbine and generates electricity. So that's the blue line that you can see. If you follow the red line, that's all cleanup, that's gas cleanup. So what you get at the end going out of the stack are the clean gases and water vapour, which you can sometimes present as steam. And then following the green line, after the combustion process, you've obviously got an ash. The metals are extracted from that ash and recycled, and the ash itself is then taken off site and used as an aggregate for block construction and things like that. I think that's it in terms of my slides, a fairly high level overview. I'm sure we can go into more of the detail in subsequent meetings, but I hope that's been an useful introduction. Thank you.
Wayne, thank you for that. I really enjoyed it, fascinating, and not least because I now know what the inside of Javelin, the Javelin Centre looks like, which I've been wondering for a long time, and I'll resist the urge to ask to drive the crane on the site visit, but looking forward to that. We're going to go to questions, team. I think my suggestion would be we go for questions in order of the presentations, so people can tee up their questions. Sorry to bounce you into that, Simon. It's probably not very courteous, but if we can go questions first on Simon's strategic infrastructure, and it might be best just to use hands. I'm sorry, I'm not particularly fluent on this one. I've been on Teams and Zoom for most of the pandemic. So if you put your hand up, and if I miss you, Sophie will intervene, I'm sure. I'm not seeing any hands, so Simon may be lucky on strategic infrastructure. I'll leave the mic open for 3 seconds. Over to community infrastructure, Philip. Not seeing any questions or hands. Kath, now if there are no questions here, I'll be surprised. I think I can see Jill going for her mute button. Over to you, Jill.
Unmute. Yes, community infrastructure. I'm on the planning committee at the district level. I'm actually three-hatted, not two-hatted, but the middle hat is district, and I'm on the planning committee. And I've only for 2 years so far, but I've seen a sort of procession of contributions go towards various destinations. The one that intrigues me is the libraries, and I just wondered whether it was possible. I mean, all we know at the committee stage is that so much goes to the local libraries. Well, in the Nuance case, we do have a library, very good one, but we see no specific returns. Not that I've ever asked, but I'd like to. Is it possible to quantify how that contribution is made and what it turns out to be from a public perspective from each development?
Chair, that's actually for me to answer, and with your permission I will. Apologies for the phone in the background. Yeah, my team lead on providing comments on all relevant planning applications and requests for, in this case, library contributions. So what I'm going to do through this discussion is ask Sophie to provide a link to the local development guide, which gives you quite a lot of information as to what we ask for and why we ask it. I'm also going to take a note to provide you with a document which we produce every December, the first of which was December 2020, which outlines what we've asked for and what we've received as a county council. That's for all types of requests, not just libraries, but again, I'll take that away as an action so that the scrutiny committee can view that document. And then each individual planning application is very much dealt on a case-by-case basis. So whilst there are some formulae behind the scenes as to what we ask and why we ask for it, it very much depends on the type of planning application, the location, the existing facilities that we've got nearby in terms of libraries, schools, etc. So there's no set formula nor rationale as to what we ask for on each plan application, and we deal with so many plan applications it's difficult to obviously go through them all, but hopefully providing you and indeed the whole of the committee with the link to those two documents will probably answer your questions, and if not, I'd be happy to take further questions offline. Thanks, Chair.
Could I just come back? It wasn't so much the amount, because that's visible. It was actually what it's spent on that I would like to know in my locality. I know that's fine detail, but I would appreciate knowing, because we just see these sums disappear, and I mean, I could go and ask my library, but I thought I'd start here. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. If I can, excuse me, if I can just come back to Councillor Mosley there. Yeah, that information is provided on an annual basis through the document which I've just referred to, which we produce every December. So it's county-wide, but it does go into detail on every single aspect of what we spent and how much we spent and where we spent it. So I'll get Sophie the link, and again, if there's any queries after that, Councillor, please come back to me. Thank you.
Simon, thank you for that. I think I speak for us all when I say it's really useful when we're getting nobbled, rightly so, at parish and town council meetings about where funds are going. It's really useful to have that in our back pocket. So thank you. Any other questions on strategic infrastructure and community infrastructure? Sajid.
Thanks, Chair. This was really a question for highways, for Catherine, if I may. Two questions. One is, I noticed recently that the contact centre number is now for emergency calls only. Have we seen a reduction in the number of calls coming through? And to counter that, have we seen an increase in the number of emails and social media contact coming through to report issues, highways issues, etc.? That's the first question. And the second question is, following Sally's promotion, do we have a new highways manager for covering Gloucester? As I've just read in the report that the highways local money has to be allocated by the 16th of July, so we can start having those conversations with the new managers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Yes, contact centre, when COVID and the lockdown hit us last year, we went to only emergency calls on the contact centre because we were very concerned about protecting the number of resources that we had there. We were working in shifts and so on and so forth. It is there. What's the easiest way of saying this? I think we are now looking at trying to get a few more contacts back through the telephone, because for a lot of things, it's much easier to be able to speak to somebody, resolve it there and then, rather than having emails or those sorts of things bouncing backwards and forwards. So we are moving back in that direction, and that's all alongside the roadmap. We have seen an increase in emails, and we have seen an increase in online reporting. And for straightforward stuff like reporting a pothole or a street light that's not working, all those sorts of things, we would love everybody to report it through our online report it tool. The reason being is that then goes directly into our system. Nobody has to double handle it. It can be automatically assigned for an inspector or a repair, and it doesn't involve our contact centre at all. Obviously, not everything is as straightforward as that, and if it's about a closure because we're going to do some roadworks and we want to have a conversation about it, then that's something that we need to talk about. Social media is an interesting one, just as you've mentioned it, because we do have a very popular social media feed for Gloucester roads, which is well followed. We've got thousands of followers, brilliant for particularly in winter or emergency times where we can get messages out to people very quickly about closures or things that are going on the network. Much more difficult when people are starting to report things on there, and our general approach to things being reported on social media is that we would try and direct people to our streams that can automatically capture that data, rather than, because we just don't have a team to manage social media. So I would say from that point of view, in terms of the LHM for Gloucester, we have been interviewing last week, and we have been successful in that recruitment. I can't tell you who at the moment because we're just tying up loose ends, but we should have somebody in place very soon. If you want to talk to somebody in the meantime, Councillor Patel, about your highways local, if that's not in place already, then feel free to talk to Martin Midgley, who's the area manager, and he'll be able to take it on for you in the interim.
Any other questions for Kath? Roger.
Thank you, Chair. Something that's always been a bit of a mystery to me is, what is the inspection regime when it comes down to footpaths and roads? I think that there is a well-developed system for including information for inspecting carriageways, but it's not at all clear that there is any, if I can put it this way, there is any inspection regime beyond reports from councillors and members of the public. Now, that may be a little unfair, but that's the impression that we sometimes get. And I wonder if there is any sort of formalised system for that kind of inspection.
Thank you, Councillor Wyborn. Yes, there is a regularised inspection programme for all of our highway assets. So our safety inspection policy, you can find that on our website, and I'm happy to circulate a link to the committee if Sophie would circulate it for me. And so the way in which it works is that, depending on the classification of the carriageway, we will either inspect the road on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, or annual basis. When they inspect the road, they inspect the footways at the same time. In addition to that, where we have high use footways, such as those in town centres or roads of shops and those sorts of more high use areas, they are also categorised, and they receive a walked inspection, again based on a hierarchy depending on the amount of use. If you want any more detail about that and particular locations and that sort of thing, then we can take that offline and talk about specific locations, and I can provide you with that information as well.
Kath, fab, thank you. Jill, I think you've got your hand up there.
I have. Sorry to hold this, but I've got another question that's just really recently arisen. I was extremely glad to receive the letter containing the details and timeframe for the highways local budget. I only wish I'd had it earlier. As a new councillor, I've already talked and know my highways manager from my town councillor role quite well, and I've had a long chat with him already, but I wasn't aware of the time frame. And I have 10 parishes, most of which only meet every 2 months, so it gives me rather less time than I would wish to ask. I was hoping, I wasn't expecting to have to complete this what shall I say, selection of bids and to find all the things. I've got quite a few in my head, but I want to ask other people. I don't want to be the initiator. I want to be the connector, the enabler. And it doesn't give those of us who are new a lot of time to collect those bids together. So I wonder if you've got any comment about any possible extension or flexibility that there might be. And I wonder why it was left until, what is it, almost 2 months. No, not 2 months, but certainly several weeks after election to let us know about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just come in quickly? I mean, I fully understand the positions this year, the position you're describing, but this year has been absolutely an exceptional year for the staff. Trying to getting the budgets together, which weren't pulled together till literally just before the elections. Then there were the elections, and as soon as the elections were over, we tried to get the information out as soon as we possibly could, as soon as we had the details of the members. So, you know, in future it'll be a lot smoother. But this year was a difficult year, not least because obviously we're in the middle of COVID, and as I'll be coming on to in the report, we were literally on emergency. We had frontline staff working on emergency rotas from the week before Christmas to literally mid-March, at the end of February, mid-March. So we've been actually pushed to the wire on so many different aspects this year. But in terms of extension this year, I think there is going to be some flexibility. I'll let Kath deal with that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Colin. Thank you, Councillor Mosley. I mean, in a normal year, what we would do, Councillor Mosley, is we would be working with you throughout the year, anticipating that there would be some sort of highways local funding in the following year. So we would be talking to you in January, February, March, have developed that working relationship with you. Obviously, we have already got contacts with the parish and via the LHM and those sorts of things as well. So it wouldn't be as constrained as it is in an election year. It is tricky, and one of the reasons that we have a deadline on it is because it's revenue funding. So it's revenue funding, which means that we need to spend it within the financial year in order for us to order it and get it delivered through our contractors. We need to provide them with that information at the earliest possible opportunity. But I do completely understand that there is, there's a whole process of finding your feet and wanting to do that, connecting and enabling and part of things. So I think what I would say is if you can do your very best to get the deadline, but if you can work really closely with your LHM and let them, you obviously know them already, but let them help you and guide you with what they know is already going on as well. And we will do our very best to get it delivered in the year. It's really basically so that the requests don't trickle in all the way through the year and we get landed, if you like, with a request in October, just as we're going into our winter season, that we then just can't deliver for you within the financial year. So it's about getting everything up front if we possibly can. It also helps us with going forwards, and I'd say this to all members, it also helps us that if we're able to deliver a whole package of what Highways Local delivery is going to be to our contractors on or before the 1st of April every year, it really helps us. There are economies of scale, it's better planned and programmed, we can combine it with other works, and just overall it is much more cost effective to deliver overall than you can imagine with 53 councillors, all with £30,000 to spend. Some wish to spend it all on one thing, which is great and easy for us. Others wish to spend it on 20 different things, and that is a huge programme of work to administer and manage in the course of a single financial year. So yeah, what I'd say is use your local highways manager. They're there to help you.
Thank you very much. If I could just briefly come back, I do appreciate your problems, and I hear that you appreciate ours as well. It doesn't help in my case that I have absolutely no idea what it was spent on in the last 4 years. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands, and if I'm not, then I'll just abuse my position, just ask a quick couple of questions, Kath, if I may. One on technical innovation. conscious that we've already discussed it a little bit more in terms of the reporting of issues on our roads and the fact that we're sort of spread across phones, emails, Twitter, and everything else. Are there any discussions in the future around automating that service? You know, I understand Wiltshire's got an app and all that sort of stuff. Just wondering if there's any plans to integrate that and automate it. The second question is around, and this is in the spirit of every day's a school day for me. That email was with regards to the Highways Local Initiative, but that's separate to the potentially additional road money we're going to get from the manifesto. I don't want to bounce you into that question because I don't think we've got an answer on it yet, but I think just for the minutes, we would be really grateful as and when that the money side of things, the additional investment is, once that's finalised, we'd be really grateful for sight on that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Morris. Yeah, in terms of automating reports and innovation, front-end systems are fairly straightforward to get hold of. We have our own front-end system, which is Report It. You can use it on a mobile phone. You can do all of that sort of stuff.
ladies and gentlemen. We'll make a start in 1 minute if people are just coming back. Right, we'll crack on. Dizzy the dog is no longer going to divorce me. She was giving me a bad look the last 2 hours that she's had a run. Probably had a stretch. Colin, I think handing over to you for 5 on the with regards to the report, which I think you're taking as read, and I'll hand over the mic to you if you are there. And if not, I'll just ask people to tell jokes until he comes. Perfect timing, Colin.
So you were waiting for me? Apologies. It took longer for the kettle to boil than I thought.
No worries at all. Jokes. Yeah, Colin, over to you for item 5, the Executive Director's report, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. Right. So I just got to get it up the screen. The first 2 items on my report are decisions that need to be made and will be made shortly. Then moving on, the next stage is next part of the report. So probably what I should say first of all is this report will come to you as a committee to each sitting. I will generally present the report, and obviously you're free to ask questions. It will be picking up the chair's comment. It will hopefully be factual, so you can monitor and see the progress we're making on the various schemes, and you can get a feel in terms of where we are at any moment in time in terms of our workload and the work that's being undertaken. So it just gives you a good overview of the department, and I've included within this report, I will include within this report, the areas that are just on their periphery that aren't represented here today, like adult ed and libraries, etc. So you can see what's going on right across the board. I think it's quite valuable to get a full picture. So in terms of the report itself, turn to highways first of all, and I will just I'll pick out key issues, otherwise I won't go through everything. The term maintenance ringway is now in the 3rd year of its contract, and it's going quite well. We've won awards for collaborative working, and it is working with the ringway and with tarmac, as mentioned here, and our consultants Atkins that has enabled us to move forward on things like the Highway Skills Academy that has stalled a little bit due to the COVID restrictions, but is doing a very good job at bringing through young people, generally from the county, for careers within the highways transport sector at various levels. And I think we've just got our first advanced one, we have advanced apprenticeship now as well. So it's at all levels throughout the organisation. And you know, our salaries are, to be fair, are below, and it was an intended thing of the council that our salaries are below the median, which because it was felt a few years ago during austerity that we didn't need to pay above average because the house price and the attractiveness of living in Gloucestershire. I think we're starting to see some of the backlash of that now, and in trying to recruit, and even trying to retain, which is the hardest thing of all. If you can't retain anymore, that's when you start really having problems. So our real philosophy is about growing our own to try and plug that gap where we can. Moving forward. Highways delivery. I already alluded to this earlier in reference to a question. It was, although it didn't seem a particularly bad winter, it was an incredibly bad winter from a highways perspective. We had, to put it into perspective, we had all of our frontline staff, and those staff, the same people when you have a flooding issue, when you have a gritting thing, when you need repair, they're the same people. It's not different sets of people. And they were on emergency standby from the week before Christmas through to the end of February, early March. And we went through a cycle of, first of all, just before Christmas up to Christmas Eve, flooding like we've never seen before in areas that we've never seen before, because it was surface water flooding, not fluvial flooding. So it's just runoff from fields where everything was so saturated. And and that could change next time. Could be at the same amount of rain, and it'd be a different issue because it's come from a different direction with the wind and everything else. So, and that's the sort of thing you're dealing with surface water flooding. That obviously has an impact on the highways. So highways get absolutely flooded and soaked. And the worst thing of all, we went straight into a freeze for 2 weeks, which anyone knows the freeze-thaw cycle. The worst thing you want is freeze straight after rain. Particularly if it's damaged the road surface, the rain's been permeated right, and the water's been permeated right into the road surface. The road surface starts cracking up, and then followed by snow. So we had the lot by the end of January or by mid-January, and then would you believe that snow didn't melt? It was washed away by another downpour for 2 weeks, where we got some more surface water flooding. Then went into another cycle of freezing, and then snow. And this time the snow was so bad that we needed blades put on the gritters. So then you had the absolute, a road surface has gone through 2 cycles of soaking, freezing, and then thawing and snow, and then blades going along top just to make sure we finish the road surface completely. The result of that was from beginning of January to the end of April. And bear in mind that's a month into this financial year, so we're well out of last financial year by now. We actually repaired 16,000 potholes in 4 months. We're repairing at the rate of 1,000 a week, and that's on top of all the other work we're doing in parallel with that, with the snow clearance and the de-icing and the gritting, etc. And we had overspent our winter maintenance budget. Didn't turn out to be quite as bad as we thought. We thought we was going to overrun by about £400,000. It ended up about 250 because March ended up quite a good month. But the additional damage to the road surface meant that we went over about £500,000 on responsive maintenance, creating about £750,000 overexpenditure this year, or last year, I should say. And that wasn't the end of it, because the road surface was so cracked up so badly. It not only went into April, but I think I'm right in saying now that level of intervention carried on into May as well. So 2 months into this financial year, we were still repairing the damage from Christmas, January and February on the road surface. It gives you some idea of the situation and the severity. So people complaining, but I can assure you it wasn't us sitting on our backsides. We were actually out doing it, working flat out. To give you some idea, in that time in the winter, we normally have 20, 21, maybe 22 gangs on a really good year. If you're really going flat out, 25, that's probably the summer. But that time of year, we normally have 25 gangs out. At the height, we had 43, and that was for 8 weeks. We had 43 gangs out. So it gives you some idea of the effort that was put in to try and stay on top of that situation. The other thing here, probably Ash Dieback and Cass already alluded to, we are going for 2-to-1, which is actually calmed down a lot of people. We've got quite a lot of backlash. That 2-to-1 offer for every tree we take down, they can't all be put along the highway, because we going to put trees back in the right place, the right tree in the right place. So you don't want large trees going back near the highway because of safety issues and branches potentially falling on the road later. So what we're looking to do is plant some woods and that sort of thing. So we're working with councils, parish councils and wood and trusts and that sort of thing, national trust, to see where we can That's surplus number of trees that we can't put down next to the highway. They'll go back somewhere else. On major projects, J10 is moving forward very well. PRM was yesterday, was it, Kath? Announcement PRA was yesterday, and the other aspects of it, which include, which I'll come on to in a minute, not just Junction 10, but including Junction 10 funding, is the extension to the park and ride at Isle Court, and that's moving forward as well. In fact, that's slightly ahead of the programme. We know we're not probably going to hit the main programme that we got the funding for the actual junction itself, because we have to go through a GDA process. We can't just do it through normal planning. We realised that when we realised what the preferred route was going to be. So that's going to create a delay to the scheme. What we're trying to do is accelerate other parts of the scheme, like Coombe Hill and like Isle Court, deliberately to show willing and demonstrate to Homes England that we're on top of our game, and push back against any chance of funding being withdrawn. I think most of the other stuff you're probably aware of. Ashchurch Bridge over Row is an interesting one. We are working with Tewkesbury, actually acting as their advisors to do the design and the implementation of the railway bridge at Ashchurch, which will actually open up the first part of the development for the part of the garden town. If we hadn't stepped in, they probably wouldn't have actually been able to deliver it to programme and in time. So it's about us working in support of the districts to enable those sorts of improvements to take place. Gloucester South West Bypass, Clancy Road. We thought we was going to go to public inquiry last May, but COVID stopped that one, bang in its tracks. We managed to get a virtual public inquiry in November, and as a result of that, we got the nod to say that we can make the necessary CPO orders. We're now in the process of just going through the judicial review period, which 6-week judicial review period. As soon as we get to the other side of that at the end of August, we can move in and start take the last 2 remaining properties and start on demolition, with the aim of starting on the construction of the scheme in January. Now that is dependent upon, and we've always worked on the principle that the funding through that would come through. We've already got some of that from the let G First, 2 million. The rest of the money was a part of the bid to the what was then called pinch point funding some 18 months ago. That our bid was recognised as a good bid. It sat there for some length of time, and then eventually was told in March this year that the government weren't pursuing pinch point funding, and that was no longer a funding stream, but it had been rolled up into the levelling up fund. So we, by this Friday, will be putting in a bid for Clantony Road, but the levelling up fund also looks ideally for sustainable transport means with just a road improvement. So we are putting in a combined bid for the missing link in the cycle route across Gloucester in parallel with Gloucester South Western Bypass. So effectively one is complementary to the other, but the cycle route part of it will actually join up the London Road scheme back to the canal scheme. So it's the missing link in the centre from going from Cheltenham towards Saul Junction. So it's quite important that each of those are complementary. And both have got really good benefit cost ratio. So we're keeping our fingers crossed there. We get the funding for that. West Cheltenham, Simon alluded to this, sometimes known as WICTIS, you'll see it, West Cheltenham Transport Improvement Scheme. It's £22 million funded by G First to carry out the necessary improvements at or around the front of G First and where the new cyber park is, so GCHQ and where the new cyber park is, to improve traffic and cycle and pedestrian routes and capacities through that section. It's divided into 4 phases. It's phases 1 and 2. They went out on site in June last year during COVID. and kept actually to programme, and they are completing this year. Phases 3 and 4 went out in January this year, and they'll be completed by the end of this year. Along with phases 3 and 4 is the walking and cycling element, which is the improvement cycle route along the A40 through there to join up with the B4603 and back to Cheltenham. So hopefully that will be finished by the end of this year. There's also some Highways England safety works carrying on at Staverton at the moment, which obviously creates more pressure on diverted routes around the area with the works that's going on. Community infrastructure, we've obviously put in now the Emergency Active Travel Fund work on the B4603, particularly at London Road, and we're moving forward the B4603 as rapidly as we can. The scheme's cost has rapidly increased from what the money was given to us by Highways England, because since they gave us that money, what's called LTN 120 has come out, which is a much higher design standard for cycle schemes, which so we're having designed to a higher standard now, which is going to take more funding. So we're having to look for other avenues to secure that funding to move the scheme forward. Arcourt was mentioned, what actually not on here, I don't think, is the rural transport. We won the rural transport funding bid for DFT, which is 1.3 million, which will enable us to put a demand responsive bus service into the Cotswolds and also into Forest of Dean. Obviously particularly useful for young people who haven't got access to cars, or those people who don't drive anyway, or maybe can't afford a car. So again, it provides that facility for those people to be able to access education, work, and other opportunities which otherwise they might not to do. I mean, when you look at it, it's quite incredible. I think it's 26% of people in the Forest of Dean and 46% of people in Cotswolds do not live within a walking distance of a bus stop. When you look at it in those terms, and that's a bus stop with a bus that's providing at least a once in 2 hour service. Well, I don't know about you, I'm not going to wait for a bus for 2 hours to get a bus to go to work or a bus to get to a train, because I guarantee I'm probably going to miss one or the other. So what we're talking about there is a pretty low level of service. So this demand responsive service, hopefully we'll start to bridge that gap. It's fully funded 2 years by the government and it's a competitive bid we put in, and will give us the ability to look at and see how that works and whether it can be extended. The ski scooter trial is up and running and going very well. On strategic infrastructure, I just mentioned the B4603. I won't go any further on that, but obviously that is really important to us to get the rest of the funding, because the B4603 will go from that scheme we've just put in London Road right the way out down the B4603 to Arcourt, where it will join on to the scheme I was just talking about, which is the West Cheltenham scheme, which will then include cycling that goes right back to the new cycle route that comes back from the station at Cheltenham. So we will have, if we can get the funding for this, and we've got a lot of it in that, we're up to about 10 or 12 million pounds. We probably need 2 or 3 million pounds extra to finish it off. We'll hope that by April next year, we will have a continuous cycle route that will go from Cheltenham all the way down through Gloucester, high quality route, onto the canal route that's there, down to Sewell Junction, and then that will eventually join up with the cycle scheme that's going along the new Stroud Canal that's being put in back to Stroud. So we'll actually have a really good backbone right through the county. We can then build up more local cycle routes from. M5 Junction 9, at the moment, this is probably one of our it's been on the cards, this scheme, in one form or other since the mid-90s, because it's been a long-term problem there with mainline queuing, which causes shunt accidents on the motorway. It should be a Highways England scheme, but they didn't appoint any priority on the scheme, and we managed to convince them to let us run with the scheme. We then put a bid into the large local major scheme pot, and it's proved successful, and we've got the nod right up to strategic outline business case at the moment, which we could develop in. We do that at risk, and if we get a successful scheme bid, we can get most if not all that money back from the government. And then the local large major funding scheme will then deliver the scheme. We are in a difficult situation at the moment because it is a scheme that is incredibly important to a lot of people. Midlands Connect, because it relieves them Birmingham box. That's the M42 box around Birmingham. DFT, because strategically it provides a start of the A46 improvement that basically is also known as the Trans-Midland Trade Corridor and goes all the way up to Immingham in the North East Midlands, edge of North. So again, very important for the levelling up agenda there. It's important to Homes England because it delivers the garden town at Tewkesbury, enables it to happen. And it's important for Gloucestershire because we've been trying to get this improvement for a long time, not least because J9 has got actions associated with it. At the moment, it's proving really difficult. And I've only just drafted letters to go off in the last day or so that will be going to DFT, Homes England, others, saying there is a time here for joined up government. The scheme costs are going up, yes, but look at the major benefits of this. And what we need to see is joined up government with MHCLG, DFT, Highways England, and all the players realising they've all got some skin in this game, and it's in their interest to work with us to try and deliver it. So it's a bit of our problem child at the moment because it's such a difficult one. The price keeps going up, and the Highways England aren't being particularly helpful with us, but it's really important for the county. A417 missing link, again, that's a good news story. At the same time as we got the funding in March 2010, just as we went to COVID, the budget for J10, £250 million. We got the nod to take J9 to strategic outline business case, and the funding was awarded for the A417 missing link. So again, a really important scheme. It's got delayed a little bit because of some objections by the National Trust in relation to the Green Bridge, but we've overcome that now. So we're hoping now that will move forward a lot fairly quickly. The LTP was approved, which sets out all our policies for the next 10 years at full council on the 17th of March. And JCS still problems, issues here with the districts and with developers, not least and most importantly with the education and libraries contributions, which has become quite a fractious situation because we receive several £1 million a year for education and libraries, mostly education, through new developments, and the confusion between SIL and Section 106 securing the funding is being looked at. We've got a consultant to come in to work with us and the district to try and sort that problem out. But there's also more underlying problems that have just come out from a public inquiry that's basically turned our request upside down its head now. So we're busy at the moment looking at other ways to try and address this going forward, because otherwise the potential loss to the county could be millions, particularly in education contributions. Libraries, the only thing I really want to say about libraries, again, because it's a new committee, we got the go ahead a couple of months back as part of our economic recovery to drive the innovation labs and have one per district. If anyone knows, the one that's in the library at Colford is absolutely excellent, used by SMEs, used by youngsters to help train them for the future and generate that interest. In those libraries, you can teach a 5-year-old how to do basic coding and things like that. So we're going to roll these out now, one per district. So Gloucester's next, and it's imminent. It's already just about to start. We recruit the 2 technology people to work with us on that. We will then be doing immediately after that Stroud, Tewkesbury, and Forest Dean's already got one, and Cheltenham. And we're just taking a breath at the moment because although we only have one designated for Cotswolds, we're thinking that probably, given the area of it, we probably need to try and get 2 in. So just taking a breath there to see A, if we can get the extra bit of money, and B, if we can actually make it work by putting 2 into Cotswolds. Again, back to that, addressing those real isolation issues. Waste management, waiting times for appointment. At the start of COVID, obviously we closed down, and then we was put under pressure to reopen the HRCs as quickly as possible. The only way we could do that safely was to introduce a booking system. As you can see here, in the spring, the demand went through the roof in April, with Pike Quarry with a lead time of 12 days. The rest aren't too bad, but we've now, well, it says here we are reviewing. I think we actually have already reviewed and put some new measures in place. Is Wayne still on the line?
I am, Colin. Yeah, those additional measures were taken, and the waiting times have come down considerably since the report was published. I've not looked since last week, but as of last week, there was next day availability at all sites for people visiting by car. The wait for vans is longer, but we have to restrict vans because of this space and the time that they take. But car availability as of last week was next day at all sites.
That's great. So you can see, and we thought up ideas that we could do, that we could implement to bring those waiting times down. This was just the first one, is identified here in terms of releasing some of the spaces as social distancing wasn't quite so critical. We've still got a couple of other cards up our sleeve we can also use if we need to, but we've already cracked that one, and we're now heading fast into the summer, where is our busiest time. So you can see we're monitoring all the time to keep on top of that and make sure that we can keep the booking system, which there's about 80% of the public in favour of keeping it. So it would appear to be the right thing to do. And the other thing I'd like to say is that one thing we're doing as part of our economic recovery is we're trying to set up an employment and skills hub in Gloucester. That's really, really important because a lot of youngsters will be coming out of school, and those that haven't got high levels of aspiration or achievement and traditionally would have gone into the hospitality sector, those jobs aren't there for them. And they're going to suddenly realise they need a high level of skills. They're going to at least need maths and English at levels 1 and 2. So I'm using adult ed immediately. All our courses are full, but right through the summer, we're going to run summer courses we haven't done before. We've written out to all the schools today saying to bring to attention youngsters that we're running courses during the summer to support them to get up to levels 1 and 2 in maths, so they can access jobs and also opportunities for training. Not least, even with all the apprenticeships that are around at the moment, you normally need maths levels 1 and 2 to be able to get on them in the first place. So to sort of provide that bridging. What we're also looking to do, or we are doing, is setting up a skills and employment hub where it's a one-stop shop will be in Gloucester initially for the first couple of weeks to get youngsters coming in, not just youngsters, everyone, right across the whole range, disability, the lot, to sort of waysign people to start jobs, opportunities, training. If they haven't got the basic skills, we put them adult education so we can get their skills up to the right level to get them on to whatever. So, and as soon as we've got that up and running, hopefully in the next few weeks, our aim will be by mid-late summer is to start taking it out to the centres, out to some of the libraries, and run some of those as courses out again to break down that rural isolation and reduce need for travel to get out to those people to help them. I mean, what we know is we've got a big issue approaching this is outside the environment side, but it has a big impact on the environment. And that is that simply at the moment there's about 17,500 people unemployed in Gloucestershire. Highest it's been for 10 years. But that's only part of the picture because there's about 38,000 people that are furloughed, and that won't unwind till September. And when that unwinds, you can bet your bottom dollar there's one hell of a lot of companies that have been taking furlough that probably would have gone bust anyway without COVID, but they've taken the money to keep going during that time. There'll be other companies will be having less staff they'll be taking on. So we need to be ready to actually help and support those people both locally out in those communities and actually at our employment and skills centre that we hopefully set up in Gloucester. That's it. Thank you.
think we may have lost Dom slightly. Phil, did you have your hand up? You've got a question.
I did. Thanks, Colin, because you've just confirmed some of the concerns I raised in the last session with Simon, particularly around SIL, because we're so dependent on it. And it looks like districts, well, if I heard Simon correctly, districts just are not playing ball. And I wonder, well, when we do the work programme, when Dom gets back, I was going to suggest that we take quite an urgent look at this, because it doesn't help our delivery with just about anything, to be honest. And the major concern, having sat through some appeals recently, is certainly around those education contributions. But I'll wait for the members and see what other members think. Thank you.
Phil, thanks. I'm back in the room. I only heard half that question. It sounds like we want to pick it up.
Yeah, I totally agree with Phil. The problem I've got as well is in the Forest of Dean, they've not even looked at implementing a SIL, and I think we're lagging back behind the rest of Gloucestershire. But I do agree that it needs a definitive process set out, so we're certainly not lacking. And so sort of uniformity would be good, but a definitive position from the county and a lead from the county that the districts take note of would be, I think, beneficial for everybody.
I think in response to that, I mean, I actually welcome FOD not actually doing SIL, to be perfectly honest. I think the last authority I've worked at, last two authorities I worked at, we deliberately didn't do SIL because we thought it was damaging, but we're unitaries. And we felt we could have had a better chance of securing funding just having Section 106 not going down the SIL route. The SIL route is predominantly for the districts, they administer it. We are where we are. It has caused some confusion. As a result of the problems we've been trying, 9 months to get them on board to do a study of the particular position, and in the finish, after about 6 months of saying they were on board and going to fund it with us, all of a sudden they said they weren't going to fund it. We've now stepped in and said, well, we'll use our money to fund it, to carry out that study, to actually analyse exactly where we are. I don't know, Simon, if you want to say any more on this, but that's still in its. It still needs to get going properly, doesn't it, Simon?
Yeah, I heard as of yesterday, Colin, that it's just gone to procurement this week. So probably about, as you say, 6 months after when I'd wished it to be commissioned. But that's where we are, unfortunately.
I mean, the issue is we're still, you lose a chunk of it straight away because the district's allowed to charge an administration charge against it. If there's a neighbourhood plan for that area, then I think it's 25% of the sum can be taken for use for local neighbourhoods. And there wasn't enough in there before to cover the strategic issues that we needed for education, transport, and others. So to start, providing sweeteners for things that possibly aren't needed, and lose the big sums of money for the strategic stuff, and that's the issue. That really is the issue with it.
If I may, I'll part that issue now and come back to it in the next agenda item. Any other questions for Colin?
Looks like we've lost you again, Dom.
Yeah. Phil.
Yeah, it was just a quick one, given the recent memories of the events.
I can see you.
Around the dire weather we had at Christmas. We've just this morning been emailed with adverse weather reports. It's just a question for Colin, really, as to whether he's confident that all our network is ready if we in fact get what's coming up from the southwest. It might be one more for Catherine than Colin, but certainly well, in the one village, I don't want a repeat of what we went through twice at Christmas. Let's put it that way.
You can never say we're 110% ready. We could be as ready as we ever will be. And the issues this time is slightly different anyway. Yes, we will get, there's a possibility of flash flooding when you get a very, very heavy torrent of rain come down a very, very short space of time. There is always that danger. Christmas, the Christmas issue, and again in January, were very, very different in that the ground was so saturated before we even started. It rained almost continuously, but not heavy enough to cause a sort of flooding, but enough to completely soak the ground during November and December. What happened then was a heavy downpour of rain on ground that couldn't absorb any more water. I mean, at the moment, the ground is fairly dry. You'll get an initial runoff because the ground is dry, so the initial hardness of the ground causes the water to run off it, but it softens very quickly and will absorb and will slow down. Will slow down. I mean, when you get the sort of level of torrential rain that we're talking about, if it does hit, I think it's all about 50 millimetres. I think I saw at one place. If that hits, in honesty, your best bet is to stay indoors because effectively there's not a road in the world that's going to be able to cope with that. It doesn't matter what crossfall you've got on that road. If you had gullies every 2 metres along it, it's going to flood. It can't be moved, and cars are going to aquaplane under those circumstances because the cars can't move the water from under their wheels quick enough. So you've got a safety issue anyway. So your best place indoors to be perfectly honest you possibly can. It's truth of the matter, Phil. I'm sorry.
Thanks for that, Colin. Festival on Fridays, so I shall be packing my cagoule. Jill.
Thank you. This is a question to Colin about the innovation hubs. The part of the Forest of Dean I represent isn't really part of the Forest of Dean. It's best described as West Gloucestershire. There are no direct routes down to Colford. We're on an axis between Ross and Gloucester, to be truthful. And I wondered if you're looking at an additional hub in the Cotswolds, which is not in some respects dissimilar to the Forest of Dean in its rural nature, although it's bigger. I wonder if it might be possible for you to have a look at some point whether there's a possibility for another hub in Newent. We have a library. I don't think there's capacity there at the moment, but the town is going to be subject to considerable redevelopment in the next 10 years. So I think if you are able to give that some consideration, even if the answer is negative, at least it will have been considered. But we don't have access, easy access. There are no bus routes. The lanes are all very country lanes down to Colford. And to get there by public transport, you need to go into Gloucester and out again. So, the transport links between the Newent area and the Forest of Dean are minimal. So if that could be, if you could have a look at that, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
I mean, the at the moment, obviously, Forest Dean's already got one. Cotswold only came up because obviously we was trying to put the cabinet decision was just to put one into each district, which I was really grateful about because I didn't think I'd get one per district. It was only when we started to look about where you can sensibly put one, and then it's like, well, should we really try and put two? We haven't got the money even for two. What we're trying to do is work out at the moment the best way to do it and fund it if we do need to. I think Newent, from what you've said, there's a good question, and I think it's one of those ones that possibly subsection 106 and the way it goes is the sort of thing that probably we should be looking for funding from, with that level of development around securing section 106 for library and innovation hub improvements in the Newent area as a spin-off of that development, and it was seen the logical way to go and find that funding through that process. Which obviously won't give you an instant solution, but it will give you a longer term solution.
Colin, thank you. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any hands, and if not, I'm going to abuse my position. Colin, you alluded to briefly this rural mobility fund is a big win for us. and it sounded like it was a 2-year trial, which sounds a long time. Just a sort of issue to flag, for the other parts of the Cotswolds, conscious of the demands and the challenges around transportation. If I could just flag that, if there's an opportunity, assuming it goes really well, sooner than in 2 years, to open up discussions about where else we might want to expand the trials, conscious that we've only just won it. But I wouldn't be doing my bit for my patch if I didn't ask, that if we can review it inside the 2-year OODA loop.
Well, one thing we want to test, Dom, is the amount of money we put in at the moment into rural bus subsidy could be better used by putting in a demand responsive service. And this is going to answer that question to a certain degree. If we can make it work without putting ourselves at risk, if at the end of that 2 years we can make it work and it ends up being cheaper to run in that way and is a better service than the way we currently subsidise public transport in rural locations, then it might well give us a long-term answer. So I don't know yet. It's early days. We just have to wait and see. And I mean, what we're doing to give us some sort of exit strategy protection should it go a little bit wrong, is that we're using the money from the government to buy 4 fully accessible minibuses, which will remain with the council. They're in our ownership, so it does give us already the start of having a bit more flexibility, depending on what happens in the longer term.
Loud and clear. Thank you, Colin. Anything else for Colin, ladies and gents? Colin, huge thanks for walking us through that. Lots of protein for us to digest, and usefully sets the scene, I think, for the last item. No, the penultimate item.
Sorry, Dom, could I just come in a second? Just if it's okay if I can just do it now, because I think it'd be the easiest thing to do it. I meant to say at the end of the last item, but because we are absolutely, we are running frantic at the moment. What I intend to do, if someone's got an item on this agenda, then obviously that head of service or lead commissioner will be here. And they're free to be here, they've got time. But for the most part, I'll front up my report and any issues, and then take it back, because otherwise it's it's normally about a 3-hour committee. So if I had myself plus the other 4 here, that's one hell of a lot of resource that's available. So, and for the most part, most visual level questions I can answer. I can deal with obviously the report. Anything else I can take back and get back to people anyway. So if hopefully the committee's happy with that. If there's a specific item that the head of services has got on here, then they'll definitely be here for that. But that's the way we'll play it going forward.
Colin, if I may, I'd like to kick that around after this conversation offline or something. Just, for me, instinctively, I'm okay with it, but I'm conscious this is my first committee chairing, and I wouldn't want to do the committee short on depth and detail.
Sure.
But in principle, it sounds okay, and there's nodding around the room. But as I say, I don't want to us to come up short.
It's what we started doing about a year ago at the start of COVID, because everyone was so stretched at the time, and I think for those that committee members are here from before, I know Phil and a couple of others are, it seemed to work quite well. But I'm not prejudging the issue at all. It's just a suggested way of working, really.
Yeah, I think, let's proceed on this basis, Colin. It seems okay to me in principle. If nobody comes to me either directly or through Sophie in the next couple of days, let's head on that bearing.
Okay.
And then if we need to revisit, that'd be great. But keen to do everything we can to allow you guys to get out there and deliver, as long as it doesn't inhibit our ability to scrutiny.
Sure.
To that end, Colin and team, do you need to be in the next item, which is talking about our work plan? I don't know, but I'm happy to let you cut away unless
I think it's probably best for us to hang around, and certainly me, but if the others as well. I don't think it'll take that long, but equally we're here then to advise on anything you may or may not wish to look at, or the technical detail.
Yeah, Roger. Okay, in that case, we'll crack on with no further ado to, from my perspective, a really interesting part of the conversation, which is the work plan for the next couple of sessions at least. I think what good looks like is if we can iron out 4 or 5 overarching themes, questions, and then the team can go away and crunch them through and sequence them and everything else. I'm going to proceed on that heading unless anybody else has any violent extensions. Phil, like, is your arm twitching, or do you want to come in with the first item?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a dog with a bone. But basically, given what we've heard from Colin and earlier with Simon and then reiterated by some, I really think we've got to be looking at this SIL issue because it impacts so widely across the work of this committee. I wonder, we meet again in July. I wonder if it's possible to draw something together for July to at least show the districts that, you know, we, the districts are the first to moan and it looks like they're the last to put their hand in the pocket. So I'm wondering if we can have a paper on that, or I'll be guided by Colin and Simon, but delivery of so much is so dependent on that community infrastructure and the levy, and I just see us failing to achieve a few things if we don't shake the tree a little bit. Just my thought. I don't know what other members think.
Roger, is your point related or is it separate?
I'm going to agree with Phil, but also go on to something else.
If we could just stick with the SIL issue, Roger, then. Does anyone else have any other comments, or do we put that down as one of the line items to be considered? Alan is waving energetically.
Yeah, thank you, Dom. I hear what Colin has said, but I've still got a problem with the forest and infrastructure, or 106, because the forest have got an history of reneging on 106s when the developer pressurises them. So I think with the SIL, at least that puts something solid in place. Because if you look at a lot of the SILs, the section 106s around the forest, they're very derisory for the amount of housing that we're having being delivered. And I hear the points as well on neighbourhood development plans, but sometimes the local issues, particularly on minor flooding issues, that 25% of an NDP would be vital, because the actual local councils know where the actual problems are. So I think it needs a wider discussion. So I would love to see SIL section 106 on the working plan, please.
Alan, loud and clear. I think what I'm hearing there is we wrap the whole thing into a broader conversation. And I'm seeing lots of nods there. So Sophie, if we can note that as option number 1 for the work stream. Roger, I think you were going to segue beautifully into another issue for us.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Chair. Not sure how formal do you or informal. I was going to raise another issue, but I completely agree that the SIL does need to be on the agenda. So yeah, amen to that. But what I wanted to look at, because members of the public raise it not only with me, but I suspect with pretty well all county councillors all over the place, is whether we can have a look at the methodology by which we do routine repairs, and I'm thinking particularly of potholes, but it would extend to other things like signage and verges and pavement repairs, and basically things which aren't the automated carriageway repairs. As in, and I only saying this as an example of what we should look at, not as a total scope, but I think the question is whether the current system is efficient in terms of its cost and its environmental effects, where what seems to happen if you have a pothole in the road and another one next to it is a crew come along and they inspect it and they put white paint marks around one of the potholes, leaving the adjacent ones without white marks on the grounds that they don't need doing, even though the guy may form a judgment in his mind that in a few months' time we will have to be doing it. So then a second crew comes along and repairs the pothole, which is different from the inspection crew. By this time, the second pothole, of course, is now ripe for repair. So you get a third visit of an inspector with white paint, and then finally a fourth visit in order to repair the second pothole. This does not feel to me like the best use of council resources. Now, I appreciate that when you're really up against it in the way that Colin was describing in January and February, etc., that you may have to do worse first, but that can't be the situation year round. And I wonder whether we can have a general look at the methodology on how we look at repairs, and whether we right to have a sort of a number of gangs who go all over the county, or whether there could be a more district and area based approach where crews get to know the areas they're working in and are able to interface at lower levels than through the county council system, and so I really feel that both on efficiency and on good public relations grounds, really feel that's an area that perhaps we could look at. I don't know what other members think.
Yeah, if no one else has got a comment, I think I'm quite interested in that process too, a sort of end-to-end process review of that sort of stuff. I mean, I don't know what's been before us, and Kath, whether or not you've been round the houses on this, and not keen to restart a conversation that's old, but it does feel apt to me, and particularly from the rural side, where things are a little bit tough here after that difficult winter. Anything to drive efficiency, innovation, and make everyone's lives a little bit easier, and stop us getting chest poked quite so much, I think would be welcome. Kath, don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
It is ground that we've covered in the past, admittedly, but it is one that obviously fills members' post boxes considerably, and it's not necessarily an easy one to fix. But I think there is not good understanding, perhaps, of what the safety and what the different aspects are. So I think perhaps something that is focused on not necessarily an end-to-end process overview, because I'm not sure the committee's got the time to get into the depth of detail for the whole process, but in terms of understanding how the policy drives what the policy is, why we have the policy that we have around safety inspections, and how it lines up nationally with our duties under the Highways Act and those sorts of things, and how we then implement that policy and why we do what we do. It comes back to resources at the end of the day, because we can have lots of people out there fixing potholes if there's the funding to do that, but that's probably not where we want to be spending our money. We want to minimise the amount of pothole repair and maximise the amount of structural repair that we do on the network, because that's going to give us the best bang for the buck overall.
Just a friendly challenge on that though, Kath. If you're a division where there isn't many resurfacing plans over the next few years, potholes would go up on the priority list. Don't necessarily need a response on that, but that's my sense as a sort of newbie councillor, and Roger is, I think, waving a finger. Roger.
Yes, I mean, I agree with what you've just said, Dom, because I think most divisions probably feel priorities for new resurfacing, but and repairs are a fact of life. But I think whilst it's very important for us to understand the rationale that you started talking about, Kath, I'd also like to explore with the officers whether there are alternative rationales which might serve us better, and I think we should be open to that possibility of changes in methods and process but on grounds of efficiency and other grounds as well.
How about we kick that around with Sophie and the team, and Kath as well, and try and find a middle ground on that one. Any other issues? Sorry, I thought I heard somebody on the mic
saying it was good.
Okay, so that's 2, Sophie, for the master computer. Any more for any more? Okay, I will abuse my position and propose something on flooding, conscious of 2 things. One, the horror that we all had last year or earlier this year, and 2, with climate change and everything else. I think it might be useful to have a bit of a review of how it went last time, and then consideration of our preparedness, planning, and crucially for me, the interagency part, which is where my instincts say we could perhaps, as a collective, have done a little bit better. Any thoughts, perhaps councillors first and then officers? Phil, I think you're waving, sir. Over to you.
Yeah, we did quite a piece of work at the end of the last environment. There's a report there. Certainly, our flood team had a lot of input into that report. In fact, I think James Lockley wrote the report, if I'm right. Is that not right? Colin might nod, if I'm lucky. So it would be useful if members had a look at that report, and then possibly if you want to bring something back, have we moved on since that report? But it was only a few months back, in fairness. I don't know, Colin might pick it up, or even Simon.
Yeah, Phil, just to clarify, I only wanted a review to check where we were in the review mirror before we start thinking about planning. So my day job wise, I really quite like planning, particularly on interagency stuff. So the review just informs a forward look. Alan, I think you had your hand up next, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know if Chris McFarlane is still online. A couple of weeks ago, I know that Vernon Smith, I think, is online, will be aware. I know Simon Excel will be aware. Chris was trying to broker a meeting specifically on forest flood issues with the lead local flood officer. It was postponed because there wasn't enough involvement at that time, I specifically believe, from the rest of the councillors in the Forest of Dean. And I think whether we should take this in isolation or part of the wider Gloucestershire flood picture, I'll await guidance on that from Simon or Vernon. Is that fair, Chairman?
Yeah, that sounds sensible to me, Alan. And I think Chris has left us to go levelling up. Sophie, it's always good to hear colleagues from other parties levelling up things too. Jill, over to you.
It's just a bit of information, really. I've been in contact with James Blockley since before I was elected. He's going to set up very imminently a Newent multi-agency flood forum at the request of the town council, which I initiated. So we had a horrendous flood in Newent. I don't think it was as bad, although it was pretty bad here, and I was flooded a little bit myself, in fact. We had some pretty bad floods, and I don't think it was nearly as bad, as I say, as elsewhere in the county. But I do think we need to be looking forward to see what alleviation methods can be used, and advice to householders as well. So thanks for that. I have read the report actually that Phil referred to, and I look forward to getting in touch with Phil regarding another flood issue which isn't directly in Newent but certainly affects Newent, and I think he knows what that is. Thanks.
Jill, thank you. I think it may be useful to whether or not we ask James to be part of this session next time to understand any best practice interagency wise, because my instinct are that is the nub of preparedness and response. But I'm happy to be corrected. Any other thoughts on floods from officers in terms of efficacy or other areas they think would be useful to get after? Simon, pen waving.
So, thanks, Dom. Didn't want to be rude. I didn't know whether you could see me. I don't want to downplay flooding because, as I've said in my presentation, it's extremely important. But I am getting a bit of deja vu at the moment, which some members be aware of. But obviously, this is a new makeup of the committee. As has been alluded to, we did do pretty much, I think, what the chair is requesting at the last Environment Scrutiny Committee, which was on the 3rd of March. And I'd certainly ask members to have a look at that report, and it sounds like at least one of you have already, before making a decision. That report it was looking back at what happened in December, looking forward in terms of what we're going to be doing, and I'm very happy for James to turn up at the next meeting if he's available to provide an update. What I didn't want James to do was just reiterate what he said a few months ago, but I'll leave that with you to decide. Thank you.
Point well made and taken. Thank you, Simon.
could also say I think we also need to be a bit careful and define problem first of all, because Gloucestershire has traditionally had fluvial problems, given it's stuck in a Severn estuary, and that goes without saying, and that has been, and we have since 2007 and the preset put on the rates gradually been working with the Environment Agency, gradually addressing more and more of those issues. And indeed, I think in the flooding in December, I think I'm right in saying only one small river tributary of just north of Cirencester, the River Churl, was the only river that actually topped its banks during that period. All the other rivers were actually did not top. So we are moving forward. What I think we need to be very careful about here, as I alluded to earlier, is surface water flooding. And I'll be honest with you, we could chase our tail for the next 50 years and we're not going to solve that one, because it's as much about climate change as about anything else. We do get much heavier, much more intense storms, and if that's on top of already wet periods, you will get surface water runoff. And what normally happens in those situations is, particularly the roads are invariably traditionally along the lower, flatter areas, and so the water runs off the field straight onto the road, and you get flooding. Do I believe we could? Some of it is going to be about it hasn't happened for 20 years, so there's probably ditches in the fields that used to be there that are now filled up with muck and God knows what. And what on earth do we have about that ditch there? Let's fill it in. I've never seen any water in it. And then of course you get the surface water flooding, and then everyone realises why that ditch was there, but it's filled up with all that sort of muck and rubbish over the 20 years it's been there. So there is things like that need to be looked at without a doubt. But I just think we need to be very careful about what it is we're looking at. I think they're two very distinct and quite different problems. Although they're both flooding, they come from they're the solution, if there is indeed a solution to the surface water flooding, but certainly the planning and the way you deal with it and the issues are probably very, very different and need different approaches.
Yeah, loud and clear, Colin. I think just the takeaway from that, Sophie, is around types and scoping the conversation. I think a friendly observation, though, Colin, in the sense that quite a lot of other communities near very, very close to flooding rivers, they had to kick the tires on their processes, and it wasn't good enough. And I take your point that only one river breached, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility to help in any way we can with preparedness. And I take that really quite seriously, certainly in Fairford and Letchley, but I do take your point. And on the surface runoff thing, I think a really interesting substrand of this for me is the effect on gravel lakes and extraction over here in the east of Gloucestershire, and how that's related to surface flows and horizontal, whatever the sideways movement of water, which isn't osmosis. Somebody told me the proper name for it the other day. But anything else on all things flooding? Should take silence as not. So we've got three, Sophie. Any other thoughts, conscious of time, but wanting to get a work plan that works for us all here?
Sorry to interrupt, Chair. It's Alex Eggenbath here. Apologies, I'm having connectivity issues, so I've had to turn my camera off. There is an item actually I wanted to raise as something to go on the work plan. It's regarding the school streets trial. I just think it'd be important to have this as an item to see how it's progressing, and then whether we could even expand it for schools who would want a trial in their area.
Alex, very good afternoon. You're most welcome, and understood our and lots of sympathy with regards to internet connectivity. Forgive me, I didn't quite catch the name of that project. I'm sorry, cloth ears. Say it again.
It's a school streets trial. So it's the about having, reducing or restricting parking or idling near schools.
Yeah. Philip, you are gesturing.
Hi. Yeah. I mean, as members probably may have noticed, before the election, we set the budget, which included an extra £100,000 in-year funding for school streets, the specific objective of expanding the trial to other districts. So we have currently 2 schools, one in Cheltenham, one in Tewkesbury, 2 primary schools that are part of a trial. Be quite happy to take a sort of an update presentation or something like that to a future meeting to brief members on the progress of those trials and also how we're proposing to take forward what council agreed.
Philip, thank you, very kind. Colin, I think you got a hand up there.
Dom, just an idea. I mean, I think it may be an idea, and my officers are probably going to look at me and want to put a knife in my back when I finish this. All the fun of being a director, isn't it? I think probably as a scrutiny, from a scrutiny perspective, I think we really need, or you need to really ask the question: are we on track for achieving the climate change that we that we said we're going to do, and what the nationally we've said we're going to do? And is Gloucester on track to play its part? Are we investing enough? Are we doing enough? And are we there? And and it's been, I'm laying myself right over to criticism here because we had a lot of plans and we're not implementing them because of COVID hit us just as we started the action plan. Got the action plan in place, but we haven't. And and I think some of those questions probably need to ask. It will be quite difficult for some of us looking into a mirror because we haven't. I don't think we moved forward. I think there's 2 questions there. One is, are we doing enough? And A, and B, if we stay on course, will we do enough? I.e. taking COVID out of it and the impact that's had. I.e. is a programme ambitious enough for where we need to be?
Colin, I want to thank you and praise you for that. I'm surprised that didn't come up, and I was encouraging the committee and hoping it would. But I'm really grateful to you for what my dad would say when he went on farm visits, and farmers show him, for those of you that have been watching Jeremy Clarkson, farmers always show you their best field. And my dad would always insist on being taken to their worst field. And I'm really grateful to you for that, Colin. And I think we must add that as an item on the agenda for over the next month or 2. And I thank you for getting on board with that positive, constructive spirit. And it's always difficult to show off what may be your worst or a tricky field. So thank you, and let's add that.
And could I just ask a favour? If you could just try and give us a chance to find FE, if you could push it maybe towards the end of the programme rather than the front of the programme, because we've been hit so hard with COVID in getting some of those things up and running, and with illness, the key officer leading it has been off sickness with COVID for over 6 months as well. So we had a number of different issues, but I think it's a fair question to ask of us and where we are.
Goodness, well, please send our best and wish them a speedy record. I'm absolutely delighted to do that, Colin. I think that's fair and reasonable. Not seeing any other hands up. I think one thing from my perspective, and I don't want to make this, a fair and legislative thing, but I don't think it is untreated sewage going into our rivers, and the scale, the magnitude, and the plans to stop that sooner rather than later. So unless there are any comments or objections on that, if we can add that to the list, and then I think Sophie's probably got enough. I think Phil's hand went up and then Sophie.
Yeah, likewise to say, not that many months ago, there was a motion brought to County Council about cleaning up our rivers. And I think in that same day that James presented his report, I think we had, was it Severn Trent actually sent a rep, or certainly sent written reps to that. So if looking at Soph, I'm thinking, could we perhaps circulate what James Blockley sent out that Simon's referred to, and also the motion around cleaning up our rivers?
Yeah, I was just going to add, so Phil's absolutely right, that issue's was looked into, and it was also agreed that a task group would be set up to look at this as a separate item. So after this meeting, we wanted to let the first environment scrutiny meet, but we will now be looking to set up that task group. So the process will be group leaders going out to members to ask for nominations to go onto that task group and do that piece of work. So you should hear shortly from your group leaders on that one.
Music to my ears, team. Thank you, Sajid.
Chair, just a real quick one, which perhaps we can add to the future work plan now or perhaps later on in the year regarding the e-scooters. We're starting to see more and more e-scooters on our roads and the safety concerns around that. Appreciate in Colin's report that you just touched on the in point 3, section 3.4 on the trial. I just wondered whether perhaps we can have some sort of an update or a report on how that trial is going, perhaps at our next committee meeting. I know that the boss of the Met Police has branded these e-scooters as death traps. Perhaps they may be a bit extreme. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they are being used in Gloucester, whether we in Gloucestershire, whether any complaints that have been received by the council, by the police around antisocial concerns and the manner in which they're being used. And also with regard to the trial, we also have scooters that are that have been modified and are ridden at great speeds, which is a concern. And I don't know, the full details of or the extent of problems we have in the county on that.
Sajid, thank you, and thanks for making that such an articulate case for the challenges and opportunities around e-scooters. Philip, I think you had your hand up.
Just really to say, by all means, if you want to have a specific session on this, it's also within your gift to invite external speakers, and so really it's just a suggestion that you could, if you wanted to, invite the current provider to present on this. And I know that they are very keen for members to engage with them in their kind of regular updates, which they do anyway. So outside of this, if any of you are keen to have that kind of engagement with them, understand and ask these questions, have a bit more time, they'll do that. I would just like to caution that most of the e-scooters, certainly any ones that are modified, are private. They shouldn't be ridden on the highway. And that, if I go back to my youth, the death trap was, generally speaking, a clapped out Ford Fiesta, really old, driven by a couple of lads with their girlfriends in the back. Fortunately these days we've got people driving, riding e-scooters, which are, I would say, a lot safer. But just a suggestion there about how we could take this forward.
Thanks, Philip. And I've now got in my head a Pimp My Scooter TV show, but that's probably for another committee meeting. Any more in terms of filling our work plan? My sense is people are fairly content and getting itchy feet, and in the spirit of quick meetings, good meetings, lots of stuff. I'll leave the mic open, except if somebody could get back to Susan Williams about the inquiry for the pilot for schools there, it'd be useful. I'm not sure who could follow that up. Philip is waving, so I will take that as a Philip to Susan conversation. I'm sorry, Susan, to come back a bit late. I think if that is the end of the work plan filling agenda, which I've lost, I think from memory, the last one is future meetings, which I'm seeing is 14th July, 9th September and 23rd November. Unless I've got that wrong, I think that's pretty much it, barring any sort of final AOB or questions, queries, comments, complaints. In that case, I should say thank you very much to all of you for joining. Thank you to Sophie, the team, Colin. Please thank the whole team that prepared for this. I appreciate it's a lot of work, given how much else you've got on your plate. So please do pass our, sincere thanks, and I thank everybody for, you know, the sort of positive, scrutineering type, critical friend conversations that I really hope we can continue. I shall see you again. Not sure whether it will be in person or not. My view is that if we are able to do that next, that would be wonderful, but I appreciate it's quite a complex web. So I shall say thank you all and have a good afternoon. Enjoy a bit of the environment at some point, given the sun's shining.